The story. My husband died in an accident when I was 3 months pregnant. My mother-in-law pressured me to abort and then kicked me out. When I went to the hospital, the doctor told me to follow him, saying someone needed to meet me. I am Maria Green, 29, a preschool teacher from a small town in Georgia. I married Ethan Davis, a construction engineer. We got married in May 2025, and I moved with my husband to Los Angeles, California, living in a house his family had left him. It was a spacious house, walls painted cream, with heavy wooden doors. Stepping inside, the subtle scent of lavender filled the air, like a home always perfectly kept. The bus pulled up to the terminal, and I clutched my suitcase, my stomach still churning from motion sickness. Ethan was waiting, sleeves of his shirt rolled up, smiling gently. He took my bag, half joking, half serious. My country princess is becoming a city queen now, but you'll always be my princess. His words made me blush and feel warm. It wasn't just sweet talk. After months of long distance, I finally had someone waiting for me in a strange city. He drove me home on his motorcycle, weaving through busy streets, horns blaring. I sat behind him, my arms around his waist, watching the brightly lit billboards, feeling so small. He said, "Don't worry, you'll get used to it. LA is like that, but there are good people too." His house had a black wrought iron gate, and inside, a courtyard paved with red bricks. As soon as I stepped in, I saw my mother-in-law, Eleanor Davis, a sturdy woman, hair neatly pulled back, wearing a dark house dress. She looked me up and down, her gaze not harsh but assessing. Then she slowly smiled. "You're home, dear. A long trip must be tiring. Come in, wash up, and have dinner." I quickly folded my hands. "Yes, hello, Mom." Since the wedding, calling her Mom still felt foreign, but I told myself that as a daughter-in-law, I had to follow tradition. She handed me a pair of house slippers, pointed to the bathroom, and turned back to the kitchen. Everything was meticulously organized. The hand towel hung in its designated spot, chopsticks neatly arranged, pots and pans gleaming. Seeing this, I breathed a sigh of relief. I had heard many stories about mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, so meeting one who seemed so orderly put my mind at ease. The first dinner at my in-laws' house was etched in my memory. On the wooden table, there was homemade chicken noodle soup, baked salmon, a fresh salad, and a bowl of vinaigrette. The aroma of the salmon made my stomach rumble as soon as I sat down. Ethan put a piece of fish on my plate, saying, "Eat a lot, honey. You lost energy traveling." My mother-in-law gently reminded him, "Eat slowly. New daughters-in-law should be mindful of their manners." I quickly put my chopsticks down, smiling. "Yes, Mom. I'm used to eating fast at preschool. I'll adjust." She nodded, her gaze softening. I thought to myself, good things happen to good people. I'll be fine. But during that meal, a small detail made me slightly uneasy. Eleanor didn't ask how my teaching was going or about my parents back in Georgia. She directly asked a question that sounded casual. "Do your parents own much property back in Georgia?" I almost choked on a mouthful of rice. I glanced at Ethan, who pretended to pick at his salad, as if wanting me to answer myself. I had to tell the truth. "Yes, Mom, my parents have a small garden patch back home. They live a simple life." She uttered a soft, "ah," but offered no further comment. But that "ah" was strange. It wasn't the kind of, "Oh, really, dear," that conveyed warmth but more like someone making a mental note. After eating, I stood up to clear the dishes. Ethan offered to help. She immediately said, "Men handle business outside the house. Let Mia learn the ropes." The words "learn the ropes" made me a little nervous. I did housework back home, but doing it in my own house felt different from doing it in someone else's. Even if it was my husband's home, it felt like I was taking an exam without knowing the questions beforehand. I washed the dishes. She stood beside me, wiping the table. She didn't scold or yell, just occasionally remarked, "Handle these dishes gently, stack them carefully." Her voice was even, but there was something about it, like a ruler pressed against my back. I suddenly remembered the saying, "In someone else's home, one must observe and adapt." I reminded myself to be meticulous, lest a mistake turn into a problem. That afternoon, Ethan led me upstairs to our room. Our bedroom was clean, with a window overlooking the trees, the breeze refreshing. He opened the closet, took out a pillow, and placed it on the bed. "Go lie down, honey. If Mom says anything downstairs, just let me handle it." I looked at him, my heart welling up. A man who knew how to stand between his wife and mother, at least in small matters, was a blessing. I sat on the bed, pulled out my suitcase, and started arranging my clothes. As I rummaged through my bag, I found the handkerchief my mom had slipped into my bag the day she saw me off. I held it, suddenly longing to hear my parents' voices, but I put it away, telling myself, I just moved to the city. I can't be weak. As evening approached, I heard a car outside the gate. I went downstairs and saw a man in his late 50s, portly, wearing a shirt untucked, walking in as if he owned the place. My mother-in-law's face lit up. "That's Uncle Frank, dear, my brother." I quickly bowed. "Hello, Uncle." Uncle Frank looked at me and chuckled. "Ah, the new daughter-in-law, huh? Seems nice." Nice is good, but being too nice can make life difficult, you know. I didn't know how to respond, so I just offered a forced smile. He sat down, poured himself some tea, and started talking to my mother-in-law as if discussing serious business. I overheard phrases like papers, property, signatures, and then Uncle Frank said, "They're pressing hard these days, Eleanor. You need to decide soon, or they'll come knocking and it'll cause trouble." I perked up my ears. Who are they? What are they pressing for? I looked at Ethan. He stood leaning against the door, his face slightly tense but trying to act normal. My mother-in-law shot him a glance, her voice low but sharp. "Frank, speak softer. The daughter-in-law is in the house." Uncle Frank scoffed. "Good heavens, we're all family here. A daughter-in-law is family too." Hearing that, I should have felt warm, but instead, I felt a chill. Because family, in his words, sounded like someone counted on a list, not embraced in the heart. That night, when we went upstairs, I asked Ethan in a soft voice, "What were you and Uncle Frank talking about downstairs?" "I heard something about being pressed and people coming to the house." Ethan paused, then stroked my head. "It's nothing, honey. Just work-related stuff. Don't think too much about it, just get some rest. You've just arrived." He said that, and I didn't dare ask further. I knew men had their pride, but deep down, the feeling that something was being hidden began to prick at my heart like a thin thread. In the middle of the night, Ethan received a call. He went out to the balcony to talk, his voice low but urgent. From inside the room, I still overheard fragments. "Yes, I understand. I'll go to the site tomorrow." "Yes, I'll take care of that payment. But don't make it tense." He came back in and saw me awake. He smiled. "Go back to sleep, honey. Just work." I nodded, pulling the blanket up. In the darkness, I stared at the ceiling, suddenly remembering my grandmother's words. "You can measure the depth of a river, but never the depths of a human heart." I didn't want to think ill, but the intuition of a woman newly married told me that despite the delicious food, there was something unsettling, a bitter aftertaste like swallowing a bone. I just hugged my pillow tightly, telling myself, "Mia Green, you have a loving husband, and that's enough. As for your mother-in-law, you'll learn as you go. Time will tell." But it seemed that from the first day I stepped into that house, I stood before a door whose hinges I couldn't see. I didn't know when it would close. After that first night at my in-laws, I settled into a routine people called learning the ropes. It sounded gentle, but it meant every step, every word, every meal was watched, measured. I taught preschool at a private school nearby. Every morning, I woke up earlier than Ethan. As I tiptoed down to the kitchen, intending to brew coffee for my mother-in-law, Eleanor was already there, stirring a pot of oatmeal, her eyes fixed on me. "Up early, dear?" "Yes, Mom. I'm used to the school schedule." She nodded. "Good to be used to it, and once you're used to it, you do things thoroughly. This house doesn't tolerate sloppiness. No scolding, no yelling, but every sentence was like laying a brick. Over time, the whole house became a wall. I just nodded and followed. Even as I changed for work, She stood leaning against the door, watching the dress I wore, slowly saying, "Go to work, but remember to be home for dinner." My daughter-in-law doesn't wander off. I forced a smile. "Yes, Mom, I'll come straight home after school." Actually, I was swamped at preschool. The kids were like a flock of little birds, feeding them, wiping their noses, teaching them songs. A colleague asked me, "New wife in the city, enjoying the good life?" I chuckled evasively. "It's all right." Outsiders saw me in a big house with an engineer husband, imagining a life of pure sweetness, but only those involved knew that sometimes honey sticks to your fingers. Around late May, my body started feeling strange. Waking up in the morning, my mouth tasted bitter, and the smell of cooking oil made me nauseous. In class, standing up to line up the kids, I suddenly felt dizzy and had to lean on a desk. The assistant principal looked at me worriedly. "Mia, are you okay? Or do you have some good news?" I froze, my heart pounding. I was always careful. We planned to have a baby soon after our March wedding, but when my body showed signs, I still felt as flustered as a child holding a gift, unsure if I was allowed to open it. That afternoon, I stopped by the drugstore near school to buy a pregnancy test. I hid it in my bag, returning home like someone guarding a secret. Only when my mother-in-law went to the prayer room to change flowers and Ethan hadn't returned from the construction site did I sneak into the bathroom, lock the door, my hands shaking. Seeing 2 pink lines appear, I froze for a few seconds, then burst into laughter as tears streamed down my face. Pregnant. I was really pregnant. I left the bathroom, pacing back and forth, hugging my stomach like a tiny cat. Joy makes you want to shout. But I had to swallow it. Because in this house, not every joyful thing was allowed to be celebrated in your own way. That evening, when Ethan returned, he immediately smelled the hot soup on the stove. He smiled. "What are we having for dinner tonight, honey? It smells delicious." I pulled him into the room, closed the door, and whispered, "Ethan, I have something to tell you." He looked at me intently. "What's wrong? Did Mom scold you?" I shook my head, holding out the pregnancy test. Ethan took it, reading it several times as if afraid he was mistaken. Then he hugged me tightly, so tightly I had to pat his back. "Ethan, you're squeezing me too hard." He let go, his eyes red-rimmed, pressing his ear to my belly as if he could already hear our child speaking. He whispered, his voice choked, "Baby, it's Daddy. I'm sorry I've been so busy." From now on, I promised to come home early. Seeing that, my heart melted like sugar in water. I had heard people say, "You only truly know a man's love when his wife is pregnant." Ethan at that moment felt so genuine that I believed, with him, everything would be all right. We went downstairs to share the news. I was as nervous as a student taking an exam. Eleanor was folding clothes on the sofa when Ethan announced, "Mom, Mia's pregnant." She stopped, looking at me for a long moment, then smiled, but it was a calculated smile. "That's good. This family needs an heir." I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking my mother-in-law would be overjoyed like any other mother, but she continued, her voice even, "If you're pregnant, you need to be careful. From tomorrow, you'll eat according to the menu I prepare. You must drink nut milk in the morning, eat steamed fish for lunch, no sour foods for dinner, and absolutely no going out alone." I agreed repeatedly, like someone receiving orders. She went into her room and brought out a small notebook, filled with meticulous schedules. Water intake times, sleep times, walking times. She handed it to me, saying firmly, "This family does everything with order. With a grandchild, it must be even more so." Ethan tried to interject. "Mom, Mia teaches. You should be flexible." She shot him a glance. "You teach children, and you have someone to pick you up. You're at the construction site. Who will watch your wife and child?" She said, "I'm saying this for the baby's sake," and with the words "for the baby's sake," I couldn't argue. When people invoke the child, you have no choice but to be silent. I suddenly understood a harsh truth of life. A hungry mouth is a vulnerable one. Sometimes, a pregnancy can be used to tie you down with soft strings. From that day on, my mother-in-law seemed to gain a new authority. She controlled not with shouts, but with schedules. In the morning, she'd ask, "What did you eat at school today?" In the afternoon, when I returned, she'd inspect my bag. "Did you buy anything outside?" I craved a glass of fresh lemonade, but I had to consider if she'd accuse me of craving sweets that would harm the baby. Once, I accidentally said, "Mom, I'm craving some Southern-style spicy gumbo." She put her bowl down, frowning. "Spicy food is bad for you. I don't care how people eat in the countryside. Here, you follow my rules." Just that one phrase, "in the countryside," made my face burn red. It wasn't rude or harsh, but it stung, reminding me that I was an outsider, a girl from a small town in someone else's home. Ethan loved me, and he tried to make up for it. He drove me to my first prenatal checkup at the county hospital in early June 2025. The doctor confirmed I was nearly 2 months pregnant, and the fetus was stable in the uterus. Ethan beamed like a child given a treat. On the way home, he stopped to buy me a box of cupcakes, saying, "Pregnant wives should be pampered." But after a few days of pampering, he started getting busy. The construction project he was supervising on the outskirts of the city hit a snag. He left early and came home late, his phone filled with strange calls. Sometimes, right after dinner, he'd stand up, go to the yard to answer, his voice low and quick, his eyes avoiding mine. I wasn't a suspicious person, but pregnant women are often sensitive. One evening, I was folding newborn clothes I'd just bought when I heard him talking on the balcony. "Yes, I understand. But don't call the house. Mom will worry." "Yes, I'll try to buy some more time." I clutched the tiny shirt, my hands cold. Buy what? More time for what? I remembered Uncle Frank's words the other day. They're pressing hard. And my mother-in-law's warning not to go out alone. Suddenly, everything connected like threads. I walked out and stood behind Ethan. He turned around, startled, and quickly hung up. "Why are you out here? It's windy." I asked directly but tried to keep my voice soft. "Is something wrong, Ethan? I heard you say, 'buy time.'" He smiled, but the smile was a bit strained. "It's nothing, honey, just work. You're pregnant. Don't think too much. People say, a moment of patience can save a lifetime of trouble. Let's just stay calm." His words, "don't think too much," made my throat tighten. Sometimes, gentleness is used to close a conversation. I didn't want to make him uncomfortable, so I just nodded and went back to the room. That night, I lay on my side, hand on my belly, feeling a tiny life within, a life that had already changed my heart. I loved my baby, but I was also afraid. I loved my baby because it was the only joy that made me feel I truly had a place in this house. I was afraid because I was beginning to understand that while a grandchild might be important to my mother-in-law, who held power in the house was even more so. The next morning, as I brought a warm glass of water to the table, Eleanor looked at me and said, as if cautioning, "When you're pregnant, you need to watch what you say. If there are family matters, don't ask too many questions. A woman who knows her place keeps the house peaceful." I froze. She was setting boundaries before I even had a chance to ask anything. I suddenly felt how true the saying, "blood is thicker than water," was. A daughter-in-law has many things she wants to say but often has to swallow them. I sat down, looking at the breakfast spread, a simmering anxiety in my heart, like the sky was calm, but I could hear distant thunder. But I still told myself, I'm carrying a child. I must be strong. I must secure a proper place for my child in this world. Even if I had to move slowly, cautiously, I would move. In early July 2025, Ethan came downstairs with his backpack, wearing a reflective vest and holding an old hard hat. He was going to a construction site in a mountain region, expected to be gone for 2 weeks. It sounded simple, but the way he looked at me as he put on his shoes made me feel strange. It wasn't the look of someone going to work as usual, but a look that wanted to say something, then swallowed it. I saw him off at the gate, and he said, "At home, listen to Mom, don't argue, call me if anything happens." After that, he bent down, gently touched my belly, his voice softening, "Be a good baby at home, okay?" My mother-in-law stood behind me, arms crossed, saying something that sounded like concern. Up there, be careful of the dangerous mountain roads. Always keep yourself safe." Then she turned to me. "As for you, stay put at home. No wandering around while you're pregnant." I nodded softly, but my heart felt heavy. Some warnings sounded like affection but made me feel trapped in an invisible cage. For the first 2 days, Ethan still called, sometimes a fleeting video call from the construction site, with the roar of engines in the background, sometimes a short text, "I'm okay, have you eaten?" I'd reply at length, talking about school, even about craving a hot soy milk latte. He'd just send a laughing emoji. That was enough to make me happy. When you're pregnant, you become easily emotional. Just knowing your husband says "I'm here" makes you feel grounded. By the 3rd day, things started to feel off. That morning, I was teaching, lining up the kids to wash their hands. Suddenly, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I thought it was Ethan, and I quickly checked. Nothing. I chuckled to myself, thinking it was probably pregnancy hormones making me anxious. But by noon, I texted him, "Have you eaten?" and received no reply. That evening, I tried calling. It rang for a long time, then went to voicemail. I walked into the house. My mother-in-law was watching the news, her eyes glued to the screen. I gathered all my courage and asked, "Mom, did Ethan call home today?" She replied concisely, "No." "Oh, he must be busy," she smirked. "Busy or not, a wife needs to know. Men handle important things outside the home." I didn't argue. I went into the kitchen to heat up dinner, but I couldn't taste anything. That night, I tossed and turned, listening to the ceiling fan hum, my heart beating out of sync. I scrolled through his last message, suddenly fearing the empty space after the read receipt that was no longer appearing. Close to midnight, I finally drifted off for a bit, only to be startled awake by a noise downstairs, like someone dragging a chair. I held my breath, listening, then everything went silent again. I tried to reassure myself. Mom must be getting a drink. But my stomach tightened slightly, the kind of clenching that comes with a premonition. Around 4:30 a.m., my phone rang with a long, piercing sound that made me bolt upright, my heart almost leaping out of my chest. An unknown number appeared on the screen. I answered. A man's husky voice on the other end spoke quickly, as if afraid to be late. "Are you Mrs. Maria Green, Ethan Davis's wife? I'm from his company. Please stay calm." My body stiffened. The words "stay calm" always precede terrible news. "Yes, tell me, what about my husband?" On the other end, I heard people talking, footsteps, the whistling wind, then the voice lowered. The vehicle carrying the inspection team was in an accident on the mountain pass. "The police are investigating. Please prepare yourself." I didn't hear the subsequent sentences clearly. My ears roared, as if someone had poured a bucket of water over them. I could only stammer, my voice distorted. "Is Ethan alive?" The other end was silent for a few seconds. That silence was like a thin knife, not cutting cleanly, but slowly, torturously. Then the person said, "I'm sorry, ma'am." I dropped the phone. My legs went weak, sliding off the edge of the bed. I sank to the floor, one hand clutching the bedsheet, the other embracing my belly, as if holding on to the only thing I mustn't lose. I called Ethan's name, but no sound came out. My throat was constricted. I tried to stand up, to run out of the room, but as soon as my feet touched the stairs, I felt dizzy, my head spinning. I heard my mother-in-law open her door with a bang. "What's that? Who's calling at this hour?" I could only say, "Mom, Ethan's company." Then everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I found myself on a stretcher, the pungent smell of disinfectant, the bright white hospital lights hurting my eyes. I heard the rolling of wheels, nurses calling to each other, a dull ache in my lower abdomen, like a hand squeezing. My mother-in-law sat beside me, gripping my wrist, her face pale but her eyes wide and red. Then she burst into tears just as I opened my eyes, crying loudly, wailing, the kind of crying meant for the whole hallway to hear. "Oh, my child, why is his fate so cruel? How will we live now?" "Mother and child," I whispered. "Mom, Ethan, She shook her head, sobbing. "Don't say anything. Don't say anything." An on-call doctor came to ask me a few questions, then placed a monitor on me. The doctor said I showed signs of threatened miscarriage due to stress and asked me to lie still. I panicked, clutching the doctor's coat. "Doctor, what about my baby?" The doctor looked at me, his voice stern but not cold. "Stay calm, ma'am. The baby is still there, but you must not get agitated." The words "the baby is still there" made me burst into tears. I cried like someone just pulled from the water, gasping for breath. I wanted to scream from losing my husband, and I wanted to hug my child tightly because the baby was still alive. That feeling tore me in two, pulling me back and forth. Just then, in the hallway, shuffling footsteps and a loud male voice echoed, "Eleanor, good heavens, I just heard the news." Uncle Frank appeared, his shirt rumpled, his face feigning alarm. As soon as he arrived, he asked directly, without preamble, "What did the police say? What did the company say? Do we have the papers yet?" Lying on the hospital bed, I felt a chill run down my spine. They had just announced the terrible news, and the first thing he asked wasn't, "How is Mia?" or, "Is the baby okay?" but the papers. My mother-in-law wiped her tears, her voice choked. "They said they'd contact us at noon. Now we need to worry about my daughter-in-law first." Uncle Frank sighed, but his eyes still darted around, calculating. "Yes, worry about her, but you also need to be clear-headed. If we don't handle certain things, people will come demanding, and that'll be a headache." I wanted to sit up and ask demanding what, but the doctor had just warned me not to get agitated. I could only lie still, staring at the stark white ceiling, feeling like I was falling into a deep pit. Outside the emergency room door, people came and went, names of patients were called, ambulance sirens wailed. It all blended into a chaotic soundscape. In that chaos, I clearly heard my own heartbeat and my baby's, both faint, both striving. I suddenly remembered the old saying, "Troubles never come alone." When you're happy, you think life is simple, but when disaster strikes, it doesn't knock, it kicks down the door. I turned my face to the wall, trying to suppress my sobs to protect my baby, but hot tears still flowed, soaking my pillow. I didn't know how I would live, only that in that moment, I had lost a pillar of support and was simultaneously pushed into a different life, where every word people spoke could be a knife, and I had to learn to parry knives with my bare hands. The next morning, I was discharged early with the condition that I maintain a stable emotional state. The doctor repeated, "You're at risk of miscarriage. Don't cry too much at home. Don't overthink." Hearing that, I could only nod. Because, honestly, at that moment, I barely knew where I was. My mind felt stuffed with cotton, everything distant and muddled. My mother-in-law took me home by taxi. In the car, she wasn't crying as she had been at the hospital. She sat upright, continuously making calls on her phone, her voice decisive, like someone directing a familiar task. "Yes, help me with that affidavit." "Okay, I'll handle the funeral arrangements here." "Yes, send it to me soon." I sat beside her, hugging my belly, looking out the window. The city was still crowded, cars still moved, people still laughed and talked, as if my husband's death had nothing to do with the world. That feeling was the most painful, a pain no one else saw. When we reached the gate, Uncle Frank was already waiting, smoking, his face grim. Seeing the taxi stop, he opened the door, offering his hand to help me out. But it was a perfunctory gesture. His eyes darted into the house as if counting people. "Mia's back, dear? Go lie down. It's tough being pregnant," he said, then turned to my mother-in-law. "Eleanor, the city clerk's office is asking about the death certificate and accident report. If we're missing anything, it'll delay things." I shivered at the words "delay things." Delay what? A funeral. Discussed like a property transfer. Eleanor nodded. "I know, Frank. You take care of things outside. I'll handle things inside." After saying that, she helped me into the house and onto the sofa. She placed a pillow behind my back, her voice soft. "Rest and protect the baby, dear. That child is Ethan's flesh and blood." Hearing my husband's name, my throat tightened. I bit my lip to keep from crying. Remembering the doctor's words, I only softly asked, "Mom, will they bring his body back?" She looked at me for a moment, then quickly replied, "The company says it's difficult, dear. The accident up there was severe. They'll handle it according to regulations. We'll have the memorial service here." I didn't have the strength to ask more. There was a hole in my heart. The more I asked, the deeper it got, and I was afraid I would fall. I sat still, staring blankly at the wall where our wedding photo hung, a picture of us in white, smiling brightly. I told myself, it was just yesterday. By noon, the house began to fill with people. Neighbors, relatives from Ethan's side, my mother-in-law's acquaintances came and went, a constant stream. Greetings, chairs scraping, sighs, and expressions of pity echoed ceaselessly. My mother-in-law, dressed in black, with a mourning veil, sat in the center of the living room like a pillar. I was also given mourning clothes, but because I was pregnant, she told me to sit in a corner to avoid the crowds. A distant cousin came and held my hand, saying loudly for everyone to hear, "Oh my, a newlywed daughter-in-law, how could fate be so cruel?" Another sighed, "I heard this girl is from a small town. She probably hasn't had a chance to enjoy life." These words sounded sympathetic, but they stung my pride. I didn't want anyone to see me as a poor country girl. I wanted them to see me as Ethan's wife, a woman who lost her husband and was carrying his child, not an object to be compared. By afternoon, a makeshift altar was set up. Ethan's memorial photo was his corporate headshot, serious face, direct gaze. Eleanor personally arranged the flowers, adjusted the incense burner, placed a fruit plate, then turned to me and pulled me closer to the altar. "Go, pay your respects to your husband." I knelt, my forehead touching the cold tile floor. The smell of burning incense stung my eyes. I heard the minister's low murmur from the living room. The soft chime of bells, a steady rhythm. I suddenly felt like I was standing before a play, and I was the one who didn't know the script. As I knelt, I whispered in my heart, "Ethan, if you still care for your child and me, please protect us." I stood up, my legs weak. My mother-in-law embraced me in front of everyone, sobbing, "Oh, my child, from now on, we'll lean on each other. Ethan has left us, left his mother and wife." She cried loudly, so much that other women around her also sniffled. As she held me, my shoulders shook, but in my mind, the image from this morning reappeared. Her sitting in the taxi, making decisive calls, like closing a deal. I didn't dare think ill, only felt a strange sensation, like someone crying at exactly the right time and place. As night fell, visitors gradually thinned out. I was exhausted, heartbroken, and back-achy. I excused myself to go to my room early. My mother-in-law nodded, reminding me, "Lie on your left side, and don't cry anymore." I went upstairs, lay in the darkness, and listened to the low voices downstairs. At first, I didn't intend to eavesdrop, but Uncle Frank's booming voice carried clearly. "Eleanor, where did you put Ethan's construction insurance papers? We need to handle it quickly so the money comes in soon for future expenses." Eleanor replied, her voice low but concise. "Frank, don't speak so loudly. The daughter-in-law is in the house." Uncle Frank chuckled. "The daughter-in-law needs to know too. She's pregnant, so we need to plan carefully. Later, if she starts making demands, it'll be a headache." I lay on the bed, clutching the sheet tightly. I didn't understand what demands meant, but I understood the feeling of being weighed and measured while I was still grieving. Eleanor continued, her voice sounding like a warning. "You take care of the death certificate. Then tomorrow, handle the city office procedures. As for household matters, I'll manage." "Yes, you manage it. Remember, this house is worth a lot. Don't leave any loopholes," Uncle Frank said, drawing out the word loopholes as if emphasizing it. A chill ran down my spine. My husband had just died, and they were already talking about the house's value. I suddenly remembered my grandmother saying, "Money is intertwined with flesh and blood. Some love their children and grandchildren for this connection, but some love the connection more than the person." On the second morning of the wake, I came downstairs early. The altar was still thick with incense smoke. I intended to change the water on the altar, but my mother-in-law was already there. She looked at me, then said, "You've done enough, dear. I'll take care of the important matters." I looked up. "Yes, Mom, I want to help too." She looked straight into my eyes, her smile thin as a blade of grass. "You can help with the pregnancy. Don't let anything happen to the baby, or you'll be blamed by this family." That sentence sounded like concern, but the words "be blamed" made my throat tighten. Blamed for what? For keeping my child? Or for existing? By noon, someone from the company came to deliver some documents. They spoke in jargon I didn't understand. Incident reports, accident confirmation, compensation procedures. My mother-in-law listened, nodding clearly. Uncle Frank asked for details of each item, his voice nonchalant, as if haggling at a flea market. I sat beside them, hand on my belly, listening to every word, my mind spinning. At times, I wanted to stand up and shout, "That's my husband," but I didn't have the strength, and I was afraid that getting agitated would harm the baby. That afternoon, a neighbor whispered to me when my mother-in-law stepped out, "Take care of yourself, dear. Good things happen to good people. Mrs. Davis seems to care about you a lot." I forced a smile. Yes, I suppose so. She might genuinely care, but the kind of care that came with conditions, warnings, and control was like a velvet cloth wrapped around a tightening noose. From the outside, it seemed gentle, but it was suffocating me. On the second night, I sat before the altar, looking at Ethan's photo. In the soft yellow light, his face was too serious, as if he still wanted to tell me something. I folded my hands, trying to suppress my sobs, telling myself I had to protect my child, protect myself. I didn't know what the future held. I only knew that since the funeral began, I no longer felt like a protected daughter-in-law, but more like a chess piece in their home. Everyone watched, everyone schemed, but no one asked if I was hurting. After the initial mourning period, the chanting faded. Visitors became sparse, and the house returned to its usual state, spacious, clean, and silent, like a sealed box. I thought peace would be a relief, but the quiet here wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of stillness on the surface of water before a storm, where the slightest ripple could turn into a wave. That morning, I woke up early, intending to make some oatmeal for myself. Since I became pregnant, I often felt nauseous and would throw up if I ate dry rice. As I stepped into the kitchen, my mother-in-law was already sitting there, a stack of papers in front of her, and beside it, a neatly placed key box. She didn't look at me, only said, "Sit down." I froze, still clutching the back of a chair. Her voice wasn't loud but carried the weight of command. "Yes, Mom, you called?" She sorted through a piece of paper, her voice even, like reading from a ledger. "From now on, there will be changes in this house. Ethan is gone, and I am the only one left to steer this ship. You're pregnant and shouldn't be involved in tasks. It's best not to do anything on your own." I heard the words "Ethan is gone," and my heart ached as if someone had pressed on an open wound. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, softly saying, "Yes, Mom, I know. I just want to help you." She looked up. For the first time, I saw her eyes completely different from the funeral days. No longer red-rimmed, no longer the "oh, my child," mother and child facade, but a cold gaze that pierced to my bones. "Help me with what? You've only been here a few months. Frankly, you're an outsider in this family, and I'm in charge." I thought I misheard. I sat stunned, my hands clasped together so tightly my knuckles turned white. She pulled the key box closer. She opened the lid with a click, a small sound that made me flinch. She poured a bunch of keys onto the table. The gate key, the front door key, the garage key, even Ethan's car keys. "From today, I'll keep the keys. When you come home from work, ring the doorbell. If you want to go anywhere, tell me." I opened my mouth to ask, but my throat was constricted. I wasn't a child to be managed like this. But I was also pregnant. I knew I was vulnerable. I tried to stay calm. "Mom, my teaching schedule is very fixed. I'll keep a key for convenience. What if you're not home?" She cut me off, her voice sharp. "No need for convenience. There are no what-ifs in this house. Just do your part. My part? I felt numb. What was my part? Ethan's widow, or a dependent living under their roof? She didn't stop. She pushed another paper towards me, a neatly written list of household chores: morning yard work, midday stair cleaning, afternoon laundry, evening kitchen cleanup, with an added line: no eating out, no food deliveries. I looked at the list, my mind spinning. I still taught all day, and now I had all this to do at home, while my pregnancy was already delicate. I looked up, my voice trembling. "Mom, the doctor told me to avoid heavy lifting. I'm afraid it will affect the baby." She smirked, as if finding it amusing. "The baby? The baby should know its place. Do you think being pregnant gives you the right to do whatever you want? This house doesn't tolerate laziness." My face burned. The word lazy was like a slap. I'd taught in my small town, helped my parents in the garden, and had never been called lazy. I wanted to argue, but then remembered my mother-in-law's earlier words. A woman who knows her place keeps the house peaceful. I was afraid of making a scene, afraid the stress would harm the baby. I only dared to say softly, "Mom, I'm not lazy, I'm just tired." She tapped her finger lightly on the table, each tap like a nail being hammered in. "Tired or not, you still have to do it. Other women work in the fields while pregnant, and you complain from your comfortable life here." My eyes stung. I turned away, trying not to cry. The doctor's words echoed in my head, but tears flowed anyway, because my dignity had been wounded. They could take money, they could take possessions, but taking one's pride was the real pain. Just then, Uncle Frank walked in, holding a cup of coffee, chuckling. "Well, what are you two talking about so seriously?" My mother-in-law no longer maintained her polite facade in front of outsiders, as she had during the funeral days. She said directly, "I'm telling her from now on she'll follow the rules of this house. I'll keep the keys. I need to know where she goes and what she does." Uncle Frank nodded, then turned to me. "Girl, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Honestly, now that you're pregnant, you should listen to your elders. Don't let it become a scandal." "A scandal?" Again, a scandal. I suddenly realized that in this house, reputation was more important than my pregnancy. I stood up, intending to go to the kitchen to avoid further conversation, but my mother-in-law called me back. "Wait, there's one more thing." She walked to a small cabinet, opened a drawer, and pulled out a savings passbook and a few envelopes, placing them on the table like evidence. She looked at me, her voice icy. "I'm keeping the funeral donations. They're for future family matters. Don't touch them." I froze. I had never even thought about the funeral money. My mind was only on Ethan and the baby. Yet she had said it up front, as if afraid I would contend for it. I tried to explain, "Mom, I haven't touched anything. I didn't intend to." She waved her hand. "No intention is good. I'm just being clear. A husband's assets are also his wife's, but your husband is gone. From now on, there'll be no talk of sharing property in this house." Hearing that, my heart felt squeezed. People quote proverbs to advise, but she used it to silence me. I looked directly at her. For the first time in my life as a daughter-in-law, I spoke clearly. "I'm not asking for a share. I just want respect in this house. I'm Ethan's wife, and I'm carrying his child." My mother-in-law looked at me as if I had defied her. She gave a short, sharp laugh. "Wife? You call yourself a wife? You brought bad luck to this house. Ethan worked on construction for years without incident. You came here, and within months, this happened. People may not say it, but I see it." I was stunned. Not a single crude word, yet every sentence drowned me in mud, turning me into the cause of the misfortune. I heard a tiny snap inside me, like a final string had broken. I turned and walked into the kitchen, my hands trembling so much I almost dropped a pot. I stood before the sink, turned on the faucet. Water rushed out, but it couldn't wash away the humiliation. I told myself the old saying, "Good things happen to good people," but then bitterly thought, maybe being too kind only encourages others to take advantage. That afternoon, my mother-in-law just served a normal meal, without saying anything further. Her silence was even more terrifying than harsh words, because it was as if she had cemented my place in the house. I ate without tasting anything. The fish felt like a lump in my throat. That afternoon, I came home early because I was tired. I rang the doorbell and waited. After a long while, my mother-in-law came out, looking me up and down, asking just one question: "Where were you going at this hour?" My throat tightened. I was coming home from work, but I had to answer as if I'd been out having fun. I replied, "Yes, Mom, school let out early." She didn't say okay, just turned and went back inside, leaving me standing at the door, my slippers still not on. The heavy wooden door shut behind me with a thud, and I suddenly felt like a stranger in my own home. That night, I went upstairs, took out my phone, and messaged Ethan out of habit, then remembered the person who needed to read that message was no longer there. I hugged my belly, sinking to the floor, trying to breathe. The baby in my womb seemed to remind me that no matter what anyone said, I still had to live. I wiped my tears, making a tiny, silent vow. Mia Green, you can be patient, but you cannot let them crush you. For your child, you must be strong. From the day my mother-in-law took the keys, my rhythm of life completely changed. I no longer felt like I was coming home, but more like going to boarding school. To leave the gate, I had to report it. To come home late, I had to ask permission. Meanwhile, my teaching schedule wasn't always smooth. Sometimes a child would have a fever, or parents would be late, and teachers had to wait to hand over. Just 15 minutes late, and as soon as I rang the doorbell, I'd hear my mother-in-law's soft cough from inside, like a bell signaling my wrongdoing. That afternoon, as I entered the yard, I heard Eleanor's voice call out, "Come in, wash your hands, then go to the kitchen. The house is dusty today," I replied robotically. I changed my clothes, and before I could even sit down to rest, she placed a broom in front of me, her voice cold. "Sweep the yard. The leaves have piled up." I looked at the pile of leaves. Truthfully, there weren't many, but she spoke as if I had turned the yard into a junkyard. I took the broom and went out to sweep, the afternoon wind blowing dust into my eyes, making them sting. I bent down to gather the leaves, and my lower abdomen ached slightly, a warning kind of ache. I stood up straight, rubbed my belly a few times, trying to breathe evenly. Eleanor stood on the steps, not approaching, just saying, "Pregnant or not, being pregnant doesn't excuse you from work." The words were like a thin blade, not drawing blood but cutting into my dignity. I bit my lip and continued working, the doctor's warning about avoiding heavy tasks echoing in my head. But who would stand up for me? The one who could defend me had become a photo on the altar. That evening's dinner was etched in my memory. My mother-in-law placed a pot of cold rice on the table, a watery bowl of vegetable soup, and a thin omelet. The moment I smelled it, I felt nauseous. Pregnancy had made my nose sensitive. Discomfort was immediate. I tried to eat, but the first bite made me want to throw up. I put my chopsticks down and softly said, "Mom, I'm a bit nauseous. Could I please have some oatmeal?" She looked at me, her eyes like ice. "This family eats rice. Oatmeal is for sick people. Are you trying to get sick?" I swallowed. "No, Mom, I'm just afraid of throwing up and affecting the baby." She gave a weak smile. "What kind of baby is so weak? Other women eat all sorts of things while pregnant. Don't be so dramatic." Uncle Frank, sitting nearby, picked up an egg and put it in his bowl, gesturing with his chin. "Eat if you can, don't if you can't. You're pregnant, not a princess." The word princess stung me. When I first moved to the city, Ethan had jokingly called me his princess. Now, that word was used to mock me for being overly delicate. I picked up my chopsticks, trying to eat another bite, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. I stood up and rushed to the bathroom, dry heaving until tears streamed down my face. I hugged my belly, afraid the baby would be affected. When I came out, my mother-in-law didn't ask if I was okay. She just said, "Clear the table, you've ruined our appetite." I froze. I didn't know if I had just vomited from morning sickness or from humiliation. That night, I lay curled in my room, my stomach growling. I opened a drawer, took out a packet of crackers I'd brought from school, and secretly ate a few to ward off dizziness. I ate like a thief. I chuckled bitterly to myself, a wife and daughter-in-law, forced to eat secretly in her room like a child. The next morning, I tried to get up early and cooked a small pot of brown rice porridge, adding a little ground meat for nutrients. I thought if I cooked it myself, I wouldn't have to ask. But just as I scooped out half a bowl, my mother-in-law came downstairs, looked at the pot of porridge, her face darkening. "What are you cooking?" "Oh, it's porridge, Mom. I'm nauseous. This is easier to eat." She placed her hand on the lid of the pot, closing it with a click. "Put it away. This porridge smells bad. We don't eat like that here. If you want it, go eat it outside." My throat tightened. Go outside? But she forbade me to go out alone. Saying that was like blocking both paths. I stood still, then softly said, "Mom, I just want to be healthy so I can teach and take care of my child." She looked at me, her voice slow but sharp. "To raise a child, you must listen to your mother. If you don't listen, you'll harm the baby, and who will be responsible?" That sentence was like a hammer blow to my forehead, scaring me so much I didn't dare do anything against her will. I put the pot of porridge in the refrigerator, my heart sour as if I had swallowed raw vinegar. At school, my fatigue was evident. Standing up for a while made me dizzy. One day, carrying a tray of food for the children, my hands trembled, and I almost spilled soup on the table. The assistant principal pulled me aside and whispered, "Mia, you're pregnant but so thin. Aren't you eating at home?" I gave a strained smile. "Yes, I'm nauseous." She looked at me as if she wanted to ask more, but stopped herself. People who didn't know my family's situation couldn't help anyway. I just had to bear it. Around mid-June, I had a routine prenatal checkup. I asked my mother-in-law for permission the day before. She looked at the calendar and said, as if laying down conditions, "Go, but come straight home after. Don't stop anywhere." I nodded. That day, I walked to the end of the alley to catch a rideshare. As soon as I stepped out of the gate, I felt like someone was watching me. I turned around and saw a man standing across the street, wearing a baseball cap, holding his phone, pretending to scroll. I couldn't see his face clearly, but the way he stood wasn't like someone waiting for a ride. I felt a slight shiver. I tried to reassure myself, I'm just being sensitive. But after the rideshare drove for a bit, I saw a motorcycle following behind, maintaining a steady distance. I looked in the mirror, and it was the man in the cap. My heart pounded. I told the driver, "Excuse me, can we take a detour through that other street? I'm a little scared." The driver looked at me in the mirror and nodded. "Sure, ma'am. Just sit back." The car turned through several busy alleys, and when I looked back, the motorcycle was gone. I exhaled, placing my hand on my belly, telling myself to stay calm. But fear had already planted a thorn in my heart. At the hospital, the doctor performed an ultrasound and said the baby was fine, but I was underweight and needed to eat more. The doctor asked, "Are you under stress? Is there something going on at home?" I shook my head, not daring to tell. I just said, "I'm nauseous." The doctor advised me to eat small, frequent meals, eat whatever I could tolerate, and not let myself get too hungry. I held the instruction sheet, feeling like I was holding a plea for help that I didn't know who to send to. When I got home, I rang the doorbell. My mother-in-law opened the door, looking at the bag of medicine in my hand. "What did the doctor say?" "Yes, Mom. The doctor told me to eat more. I'm underweight." She frowned. "You're underweight because you're a picky eater. You complain about everything I cook, making things difficult for everyone while you're pregnant." I wanted to say, "I'm not complaining," but I was too tired, both physically and mentally. I went straight into the kitchen to clean up, as was my habit. As I was cleaning the kitchen, I overheard my mother-in-law talking to Uncle Frank in the living room, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. "She's pregnant, but so weak. If anything happens, it will bring shame to our family." Uncle Frank replied nonchalantly, "Shame or not, Eleanor, focus on the house and the paperwork first. There's always a way to handle a daughter-in-law." I froze, the cleaning rag dropping to the floor. Always a way. Away for what? I didn't want to think, but my mind kept conjuring up terrible scenarios. That night, I lay curled up, having only eaten one bowl of rice and a few crackers all day. My stomach was empty, but I couldn't swallow anything. I placed my hand on my belly, softly speaking to my baby, as if to comfort myself. Hang in there, little one. Mama's hanging in there too. People say that with a child comes fortune, but I only wished for my child to have the motivation to live. Even as I said that, tears streamed down my face, not from weakness, but because I was starting to feel trapped in a corner. Inside the house, I was the one who had to know my place. Outside, I felt watched. I felt like I was standing between two walls, and the more I struggled, the more I got bruised. But just then, my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number, just one simple sentence: "Don't trust anyone in that house." I stared at the screen, a chill running through my entire body. The message from the unknown number kept me awake almost all night. Don't trust anyone in that house. I read it over and over, my palms cold and clammy. I typed a reply: "Who is this? Why are you messaging me?" But the message only showed one check mark, then went silent. That silence felt like someone breathing cold air down my neck, making me both scared and angry. Scared because I didn't know who they were, angry because if they knew my family was in trouble, why didn't they just say it directly instead of throwing me a cryptic message and disappearing? The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes. I tried to wash my face for a long time to hide the signs of sleeplessness. Nearly 3 months pregnant, my body was already weak, and my mind was in turmoil. Standing before the mirror, I told myself to stay calm. The doctor had warned me, agitation harms the baby. As I stepped into the kitchen, I heard my mother-in-law talking on the phone in the living room, her voice harsher than usual. What do they want? I told them, "This is an ongoing matter. Don't come to my house." She slammed the phone down, then turned to look at me. Her gaze was like a thin knife, cutting straight through me. "Come here. I need to talk to you." I sat down, my heart pounding. I didn't know if it was from fear or hunger. I hadn't eaten much since last night. Eleanor placed a thick envelope and a folded piece of paper in front of me. She didn't beat around the bush. Let me be frank. You're just getting in the way here. This family is already complicated. You're pregnant and can't do anything helpful. You're just a burden. I swallowed hard. Mom, I still teach. I still do housework. I just ask that you let me eat more comfortably. She waved her hand dismissively. Don't boast. You teach for yourself. This family doesn't need your money. Hearing that, my face burned with anger. I had never asked her for a dime. I taught because I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. But at this point, I knew arguing would only add fuel to the fire, so I tried to lower my voice. What do you want to talk about, Mom? Please tell me clearly. She pushed the paper towards me. On it was the address of a clinic, handwritten in a strong script with an appointment time below. My heart sank. Mom, this is... She looked straight at me. A clinic. Take the money in the envelope and go there to deal with the pregnancy. My ears buzzed. I thought I misheard. What did you say, Mom? This is Ethan's child, your grandchild. She gave a weak smile, her voice cold as well water. Grandchild? A grandchild born to tie me down? Ethan is gone. Do you think holding on to this pregnancy will keep you tied to this house? I sprang up, reflexively clutching my belly. No, I'm not clinging to the house. I just want to have my baby. I'm Ethan's wife. I can't do that. She slammed her hand on the table with a thud. I trembled but remained standing. She continued, each word like a blow to my dignity. You're still young. If you give birth to a fatherless child, who will bear the burden for you later? And what will people think of this family? I'm saying this for your own good. My throat seized up. For my good or for yours? She narrowed her eyes. Don't be insolent. I've taken care of you for months. You've eaten and slept here. Now listen to me. A fish that doesn't take salt will rot. Do you understand? I looked at the envelope, my hands trembling uncontrollably. On the corner of the envelope, she had clearly written the amount, $28,000. That amount was not small to me at this moment, but it was placed on the table like the price of a life. I said, my voice both trembling and firm, "Mom, please, I'll endure any hardship. I can live on my own. I just ask to keep my baby." She burst out laughing, a laugh that chilled me to the bone. "Live on your own? With what? How much does a teacher's salary get you to live on your own? The creditors will come after you and the baby. Who will bear that burden?" I froze. Creditors. So the feeling of being watched wasn't just my imagination. I looked at her, suddenly seeing more clearly than ever. She wasn't worried about me. She was using that fear to intimidate me. Just then, Uncle Frank walked in from outside, car keys in hand. He looked at me, then at the envelope, his voice casual but venomous. "Eleanor's right. Keeping this pregnancy will only cause more trouble. Girl, if you know your place, you'll save yourself a lot of grief. Don't let people say you're greedy." I turned to him, my eyes red. "Uncle, how can you say such a thing? This is Ethan's flesh and blood." Uncle Frank shrugged. "Flesh and blood still has to consider the circumstances. You don't understand this family's circumstances." I felt the whole room tilt. I didn't know if I was standing or falling. I only felt my abdomen tighten in spasms, as if the baby inside me was also panicked. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and said clearly, "I won't do it. Even if you kick me out, I won't do it." My mother-in-law looked at me as if I were a stubborn object. She slowly stood up and walked towards the stairs. I thought she was giving up, but only a few minutes later, she pulled down one of my suitcases. The same suitcase I had brought when I moved to Los Angeles. She slammed it onto the floor. "Then get out." I froze. Everything in me felt numb. She pointed to the door. "This is a Davis family home. Don't think that carrying a baby gives you the right to stay. I'm giving you a decent way out. If you don't go, you'll have to face the consequences yourself." I looked at the suitcase lying open. Its zipper burst, a few clothes spilling onto the floor. My dignity seemed to spill out with them, right in front of the two people who claimed to be my husband's flesh and blood. I tried to say one more time, my voice hoarse, "Mom, I'm not asking for property. I just want a place to have my baby, to work and raise my child." Eleanor snapped. "If you want to raise your child, go back to your small town. Don't be an eyesore here. From now on, this house has only one owner." Uncle Frank walked over, threw the gate open with a bang, and dragged my suitcase out into the yard as if it were a piece of discarded junk. He said nonchalantly, "Go quietly. Don't make a fuss and disgrace yourself." I walked out instinctively, my legs feeling like they didn't belong to me. The midday Los Angeles sun beat down on my face, stinging hot. I hugged my belly, standing in the middle of the yard, looking at the dull black gate, the same gate I had walked through just months ago, with hopes of a warm home. My mother-in-law stood inside the doorway, not stepping out. She threw the envelope and the clinic address onto the ground right at my feet. "There's the address I gave you. You figure it out yourself." I bent down to pick up the paper, my hands trembling so much the paper fluttered. I picked up the envelope, not because I was greedy for money, but because I knew I was leaving here. In my pocket, I had almost nothing but my phone and some wages I hadn't withdrawn yet. I looked up at her. My lips pressed tightly. Could I still call her Mom? My throat was constricted as if I had a lump of stone. Finally, I only said one very soft sentence, "I won't abandon my child." She didn't reply. The wooden door closed slowly but decisively, like the lid of a coffin closing on a relationship that had died even before my husband did. I dragged my suitcase to the curb, the wheels clattering on the pavement, each sound like a knock on my heart. I watched the stream of people passing by, everyone busy, everyone in a hurry. No one knew I had just been kicked out of my in-laws' house while carrying a new life. I thought of my parents in Georgia, of the looks from the neighbors if I returned home pregnant without my husband, of the saying people often quoted, "A daughter-in-law's life has 100 paths," and my throat felt bitter. But then I placed my hand on my belly, took a deep breath. I might have been kicked out of a house, but I couldn't kick my own child out of life. I gripped the handle of my suitcase tightly, tucking the address paper into my pocket. not to follow it, but to remember how I had been treated. I walked into the sun, walking and telling myself, Mia, as long as you can stand, your child has a mother. I dragged my suitcase for a while, then my legs went weak. The midday Los Angeles sun was like fire. I had nowhere to go and dared not call home. I feared my mom's sighs, my dad's silence, a silence heavier than words of blame. I stopped at a convenience store, bought a bottle of water, and sat huddled under the awning, hand on my belly, breathing in short gasps. In my pocket was the $28,000 envelope, a sum that felt like a life raft someone had just thrown, but the raft was covered in mud. I didn't want to touch it, but I couldn't pretend I didn't need it. I had to live for my child to live. I took out my phone, opened Google Maps, and searched for the nearest OB/GYN clinic, specifically avoiding the address my mother-in-law had given me. I wasn't naive enough to walk into a place they had set up like a trap. I chose a small clinic down an alley, with a modest sign, looking neither too fancy nor too crowded, just discreet enough. I called a rideshare, telling the driver to go around the main road before turning into the alley, a cautious route. In my heart at that moment, I had only one wish: to hear the baby's heartbeat, to know my child was still okay, to find the courage to keep going. The clinic was at the end of the alley, its glass door emblazoned with OB/GYN, ultrasound, pregnancy counseling. I stepped inside. The faint smell of antiseptic filled the air. The receptionist asked for my name, age, and week of pregnancy. I spoke softly, my voice still trembling. Maria Green, nearly 3 months. The receptionist looked at me, then handed me a form. In the waiting room, there were a few women with swollen bellies, accompanied by their husbands, carrying bags of milk and fruit. Watching them, my heart ached, and I suddenly felt out of place. Their husbands were alive and well. The thought flashed, making me bite my lip, forcing myself not to cry. A moment later, the clinic door opened, and an older man stepped out, salt and pepper hair, glasses, wearing a crisp lab coat. He looked at a list, then called, "Miss Green, please come in." His voice was deep and warm, the kind that made people trust him easily. I walked in, still clutching my belly out of habit. He gestured to a chair. "Please sit, Miss Green. Are you feeling tired?" I nodded. "Yes, doctor. I'm a bit nauseous, and I've just been through a shock." He looked at me intently, his eyes kind. "Just tell me the truth. No one here will judge you." I didn't know why, but hearing that, my throat tightened. People are often quick to judge, especially a pregnant woman seeking care alone. I didn't tell him everything, just vaguely said, "I'm having family problems." He didn't press immediately, just told me to lie on the ultrasound bed. I lay down, looking at the white ceiling, my hands gripping the edge of my dress. The cold ultrasound wand touched my skin. I flinched. The doctor focused on the screen, tapped a few times, then suddenly the room fell silent. "Doctor, is my baby okay?" I panicked. He pressed a small button, and a heartbeat echoed, thumping, thumping, clear as a drum in my chest. The baby's heartbeat, my baby's heartbeat. I burst into tears, uncontrollably, tears streaming down both temples. The doctor offered me tissues, his voice still reassuring. "The baby is stable. Good news. You can relax." I gasped. "Thank you, doctor. I'm scared. I'm scared I can't keep it." He looked at me slowly. "You can keep it, but you also need to keep your spirits up. You're malnourished and stressed, which is dangerous." I wiped my tears, trying to breathe. He continued the ultrasound, then said something that made my heart ache with both joy and pain. "It's most likely a baby boy." Hearing that, I instinctively placed my hand on my belly, as if holding a tiny sunbeam in my life. A baby boy. If Ethan were alive, he would have smiled until his eyes were red. The doctor wrote a few lines in my file, then looked up and asked, his voice as if making casual conversation, "How long have you and your husband been together?" I paused slightly. "Oh, we've known each other for over a year, then got married." He nodded. "When you got married, did either family object?" I was surprised. Why would he ask that during a prenatal checkup? I answered honestly. No, no objections. It's just my family is from a small town, and my husband's family is from the city, so there were some differences. He then asked, "How long has your husband been gone?" I stiffened. I didn't want to bring it up, but he asked in such a calm voice that I felt compelled to answer. Just since early July. He gave a very soft ah, and then stood up to pour me a warm glass of water. "Drink a little, it will help with the dizziness." I held the cup, both grateful and a little suspicious. He was too kind, a kindness that didn't feel like a random encounter. I looked at him, my mind wavering. "Doctor, the fee for the consultation." He waved his hand. "We'll worry about that later. Just rest. I want to tell you a few things." I sat back, feeling more confused. He pulled his chair closer and lowered his voice. "Don't go to the address they gave you." "You understand what I mean, don't you?" I gasped. "How? How do you know, doctor?" He didn't answer directly, just said, "I've seen many things in my profession. Looking at you, I know you're cornered, but listen to me. Don't give up on the baby." Those words were like a clean life raft thrown directly into my hands. I nodded frantically. "Yes, I won't give up, I swear." He looked at me for a moment, then slowly said, "Follow me to meet someone. After you meet them, you'll understand why you're being treated this way. But you must stay calm and absolutely do not make a scene here." I swallowed hard. "Who is it?" he replied concisely. "Someone who knows your husband well and knows your in-laws well." A chill ran down my spine. The strange message reappeared in my mind. Don't trust anyone in that house. I didn't know who this doctor was to trust, but I didn't have many options left. The baby in my womb was like a reminder. Stay on the right path. Don't take risks. I hesitated. "Doctor, I'm scared." He looked straight at me. "Scared or not, you must take the step. When you share happiness, you share sorrow. But you're bearing this alone, and that's not right." I fell silent. His words struck at my deepest humiliation. I clutched the strap of my bag, nodding very slightly. To those listening, if this story resonates with you, please give the channel a like to support it. And if you were in my shoes, pushed to the point of being pregnant and out on the street, would you choose to endure or fight for justice? Please leave a comment below. Please listen to the end, because a surprise twist awaits. Will the truth about Ethan still be as I imagined? The doctor led me out through a back exit of the clinic, avoiding the crowd in the main waiting area. He called a taxi, telling the driver to keep the air conditioning moderate for the pregnant woman. The way he meticulously arranged everything made me feel even stranger, but I no longer had the energy to question every little thing. I just memorized the license plate number, a habit of self-preservation. The taxi stopped in front of a small coffee shop on a quiet, peaceful street. The doctor helped me out, instructing, "Sit at that corner table. I'll call the person in." I sat down, holding a warm cup of water in my hands, my heart pounding even harder than when I heard the baby's heartbeat. I told myself, don't get your hopes up unnecessarily. More hope, more pain. But a small voice inside me kept knocking. Who knows? The cafe door opened, and a man walked in, tall, tanned, the kind of person familiar with construction dust. He looked around, then froze when he saw me, his eyes red as if he'd been awake for many nights. The doctor pulled up a chair and briefly introduced us. "This is Miss Green, and this is Jake Miller." I heard that name, and my heart felt squeezed. Jake Miller, Ethan's close friend, the one I'd heard my husband mention before. Jake's a good guy. Jake Miller sat down opposite me, his hands clasped, his voice hoarse. "Mia, I'm so sorry I'm late." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice normal. "Jake, what do you know about my husband? Please tell me. I can handle it." Jake Miller bowed his head for a very long moment, then looked up, his eyes like someone about to reveal a forbidden secret. He spoke slowly, each word heavy as a stone falling into water. "Mia, stay calm. Ethan might not be dead." The words "Ethan might not be dead" dropped onto the table like a stone that didn't explode immediately but numbed me from my fingertips to my spine. I gripped the warm cup of water so tightly I thought it would shatter. I didn't scream. I didn't cry right away. When people are too shocked, tears don't come, only a dry, burning throat remains. "What did you say?" My voice was strained. "Jake, please, don't joke about this." Jake Miller bowed his head, his shoulders slumped like a cement bag he was used to carrying at the construction site. He spoke very softly, but every word was clear. "I wouldn't dare joke. I'd rather you hit me than get this wrong. But you have to stay calm because this isn't just a simple accident." I turned to Dr. Robert Stone. He sat still, his face serene, like someone who had anticipated my reaction. He only said one thing: "Just listen to everything first." I turned back to Jake Miller. If Ethan was still alive, then what was the funeral, the altar, the days I spent kneeling and mourning? Jake bit his lip, his eyes red. It was a cover-up. As I said before, I only know parts of it. Because Ethan, he hid it very well. I gave a laugh, but it sounded like a sob. Hid it well so I'd be kicked out, forced to abort. That's hid it well, you say. Jake Miller raised his hands as if pleading with me not to misunderstand. "Mia, I know you're angry, but if you listen to the end, you'll know that even Ethan didn't anticipate everything." He pulled a neatly folded stack of papers from his pocket and placed them on the table. Not property deeds, but photocopies of contracts and construction logs. He pointed to each line, his voice a mix of anger and helplessness. Ethan fell into a trap. The counterparty inflated material costs, shifting responsibility to the inspection team. When it came time for acceptance, they reneged, claiming the specifications were wrong, penalizing the contract, and demanding compensation. The amount ballooned to $3.6 million. I froze. $2. $6 million. That was a number somewhere in the sky, unrelated to my life as a preschool teacher. But now it crashed down directly, sitting heavily on the coffee table. $3.6 million. Where would Ethan get that kind of money? I asked, my mouth tasting bitter. Jake Miller shook his head. He tried every avenue, borrowed money quickly, borrowed from friends, even mortgaged his bonus. He intended to pay a portion to buy time, then find a way to sue them, but the other side wouldn't allow it. They threatened to come to the house and make a big scene, demanding immediate payment. I remembered my mother-in-law's angry phone call, the feeling of being watched. Each piece of the puzzle slowly fit together, forming a picture that chilled me. "So the accident?" I asked, my heart pounding like a drum. "Was that accident real?" Jake swallowed hard. There were unusual signs. From the moment I heard the news, I felt something was off. First, the accident confirmation papers came too quickly. Second, someone in the company quietly told me that someone had taken care of everything. Who took care of it? How so quickly? Then I heard that an unidentified body was brought in to complete the procedures. I was stunned. I raised my hand to cover my mouth, afraid I would vomit. I didn't want to believe it, but I also couldn't dismiss it, because smoke doesn't appear without fire. The old saying was true, no smoke without fire. I looked straight at Jake Miller. "Jake, the person who died in the funeral wasn't my husband, was he?" Jake was silent for a long time, that silence like a silent slap. Then he nodded very slightly. I laughed, a pained laugh this time. "So who did I kneel for? Who did I mourn? Whose funeral was it?" I gripped the edge of the table. "Where is Ethan? Does he know I was kicked out of the house?" Jake glanced at Dr. Stone, as if asking permission. "Doctor." Stone remained silent, only nodding very slightly. Jake then continued, his voice lowered. "Mia, Ethan told me to only tell you when you were pushed to your absolute limit. He was afraid you'd be shocked, afraid it would affect the baby. He thought Mom would protect you." I looked up. "Mom? You mean Eleanor?" Jake bowed his head, his voice choked. "Yes." I pressed, no longer concerned with politeness. "She knew? She knew and still pressured me to abort? Still kicked me out?" Jake didn't look at me, but each word came out clearly. She knew about the debt, knew about Ethan having to disappear, and she played a part in letting things escalate. My ears buzzed, like in the hospital the day I heard the news. I remembered my mother-in-law's face, embracing me, crying at the funeral. I remembered her saying, "We'll lean on each other now," which now turned into a performance. Suddenly, I wanted to jump up, run back to that house, pound on the door, and demand answers. But then my hand touched my belly. The baby was still there, as fragile as a breath. I forced myself to stay seated. "Jake," I lowered my voice, but it trembled uncontrollably. "Tell me clearly what she wants." Jake exhaled heavily. "I can only tell you what I know. She was afraid the creditors would make a big scene, afraid of implicating their assets, and she disliked you because you were from a small town. She saw the pregnancy as a burden. She thought if you disappeared, everything would be easier to handle." I closed my eyes. Easier to handle. So I and my child were something to be handled. I opened my eyes, looking at Jake as if clinging to him. And Ethan? Did he really want to abandon his child and me? Jake shook his head vigorously. "No, Ethan loves you very much. He was just trapped. He trusted his mother, but you know how it is. People say a kind mother raises a virtuous child, but some houses only hang the word kind on their door." I couldn't speak. I only felt a part of my heart collapse, while another part hardened like stone. I was no longer the Maria Green who had first moved to Los Angeles. Jake pulled his chair closer and lowered his voice. "Mia, you have to listen to me now. Don't go back to that house. Don't call her and make demands. You're pregnant. You're vulnerable. They want you to stay silent. The more you stir things up, the more dangerous it becomes." I gave a weak laugh. "I am silent. I've been thrown out on the street." Jake nodded, his face pained. "I know, and that's why I'm giving you this." He opened his bag, took out an old cell phone, its screen cracked, its edges peeling paint, the kind of phone people used as a secondary device. Jake placed it in my hand like an artifact. "This is Ethan's phone. He hid it well, and I've been keeping it safe for a while. There's something in here you need to hear." I looked at the phone, staring at it for a long time, as if looking at the hand of someone who had disappeared. I pressed the power button, and the screen lit up, showing a password field. "I don't know the password," I said, my throat tight. Jake looked at me, his eyes full of remorse. He once said, "If you can't open it, try things related to you and the baby." I placed my hand on my belly, taking a deep breath. In my mind, a single date flashed, one I had recently memorized, my due date the doctor had written. My hands trembled as I entered the numbers, my heart pounding, afraid of making a mistake, afraid of hope followed by disappointment. The screen unlocked. I froze. Then tears streamed down my face, too fast to wipe away. Not crying from weakness, but because, for a moment, I felt as if Ethan was standing beside me, whispering, "I'm still thinking of you." On the screen were a few old app icons, photos from the construction site, some note files, and a folder simply named Home. I reached out to touch that folder, but my hand suddenly froze, as if afraid that what I was about to see would change my entire life. I took a breath, tapped to open it, and sat still, looking at the glowing screen in my palm, like looking at a small lamp in the night. The phone screen glowed faintly in my palm. The Home folder opened, revealing audio files named simply by date. Some were labeled evening, some morning, some just a number. I looked at Jake Miller, my throat dry. "Jake, what are these?" Jake replied softly. "Ethan always recorded arguments and important conversations to review later. That's just how he was. Very cautious." I bit my lip. Cautious, yet he still fell into a trap. I put on the headphones Jake handed me and pressed play on the first file. A faint static sound, then Ethan's voice, tired but calm. "Mom, I told you, I'll be gone for a few months to resolve this, then I'll come back. Mia is pregnant. I can't abandon her." Next was my mother-in-law, Eleanor Davis's voice. Her voice in the recording was different from how she usually spoke to me. It was lower, sharper, without the virtuous facade she usually wore. "Don't be so foolish, Ethan. If you're going to disappear, do it cleanly. If you leave your daughter-in-law here, the creditors will come and drag this whole family down. Ethan, I already told them not to make a big scene. Mia doesn't know anything, she's innocent." Eleanor scoffed. "Innocent makes it easier to control," Ethan. You love her. Keep her with you. Don't let her cling to this house. The words easier to control sent shivers down my spine. I still remembered the funeral days when she hugged me in front of everyone and said, "We'll lean on each other now, my child." Yet, in the recording, she treated me like an object to be manipulated. Jake Miller sat opposite me, not daring to look me in the eye. I clicked another file. This time, Uncle Frank's voice chimed in, loud and clear. "Eleanor's right. The papers for this house need to be in order. If the daughter-in-law gets a hold of anything, it'll be a mess. Wait until she gives birth, and she'll be holding the baby, crying. If you get soft then, everything will be ruined." "Eleanor, when have I ever been soft, Frank? I only act soft in front of outsiders. In this house, I make the decisions." I took off the headphones for a second to breathe. The air in the coffee shop felt thick. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling the baby seem to curl up. Jake Miller quickly said, "Mia, drink some water. Don't let your blood pressure drop." "I don't need water." I looked straight at Jake Miller. "You knew all this. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Jake swallowed. "Ethan told me that if you knew early, you'd confront his mother and it would be dangerous. He was afraid you'd get agitated. He was afraid for the baby." I gave a dry laugh. "He was afraid I'd get agitated, but he wasn't afraid his mother would throw me out on the street?" Jake lowered his head. "I'm not taking sides. It's just..." I was also stuck. Eleanor isn't an easy person to cross, and there were also the debts and people watching you. The words "people watching you" sent another chill down my spine. So it wasn't my imagination. I pressed play on another file, trying to keep my hands from shaking. This file didn't begin with Ethan's voice, only the sound of a door closing, footsteps, then my mother-in-law's voice, like a command. "Listen to me, Ethan. Cut off contact. Disappear. I'll tell your daughter-in-law you're dead. She'll cry for a few days, then she'll worry about herself, being pregnant." Ethan's voice hardened. "What are you saying, Mom? I won't let you say that." "Eleanor, you won't let me? You owe people money. Who do you think you are? I'm telling you plainly, your poor daughter-in-law can't help you. If she gives birth to that child, it will become a chain. You won't be able to rebuild your life later." Hearing this, my ears buzzed like a disturbed beehive. Rebuild his life. So in her mind, Ethan had a different plan, and my child and I were just obstacles. I took off the headphones, placing them on the table, and looked straight at Dr. Stone. He still maintained his serene expression, like a chess player who already knew the next move. "Doctor, how did you know to call me to meet Jake?" Dr. Stone replied slowly. "Someone asked me to. I just did what was necessary to keep you from walking into a dangerous situation." The answer wasn't wrong, but it wasn't enough either. Before I could ask further, Jake Miller placed his hand on the table and spoke quickly, as if afraid I would get caught up in suspicion and lose my composure. "Mia, the important thing now is that you know the truth. Don't go back to that house. Don't call her and yell. Don't be aggressive. They're waiting for you to be aggressive so they have an excuse." I looked at him. "An excuse for what?" Jake exhaled heavily. "An excuse to say you're unstable, an excuse to say you're fabricating things, an excuse to push you away even further. We have to be smart. We have to have evidence." I looked down at the phone. In the home folder, there were a few other items: photos of documents, saved message screenshots. I opened one photo. It was a chat between Uncle Frank and my mother-in-law. I didn't need to read the whole thing. One sentence was enough to chill me. The notary's familiar with it. "Just say the daughter-in-law left voluntarily, and it's done." I gasped, as if someone had squeezed my chest. Voluntarily. So they had already prepared the words to make it look like I had abandoned them, disappeared on my own. If anything happened to me, they could just say, "She went somewhere. We don't know where." A proverb my mom often quoted flashed in my mind: "Love others, and heaven will love you back." I had always believed that, but now I understood another lesson life taught. Love isn't enough. You also have to know how to protect yourself. I looked up, my voice hoarse but resolute. "Jake, I have nothing left to lose but my child. Tell me what exactly I need to do. Jake Miller seemed to have been waiting for that question. He immediately said, "First, you need a safe place to stay. Second, change your contact number temporarily. Don't let them find you. Third, keep this phone safe. We need to back up the data. Fourth, you need to pretend to be weak so Eleanor thinks you're scared, that you'll disappear as they wish." I frowned. "Pretend to be weak?" Jake nodded. "Call Eleanor and tell her you're going somewhere else to rest during your pregnancy and won't be a bother. Don't mention the recordings. The more submissive you seem, the more overconfident she'll become." Hearing that, I gave a bitter laugh. In this life, being kind could also be a tactic, just a battle of wits. "And a place to stay?" I asked. Jake said, "I know a landlady, Mrs. Henderson. She's a businesswoman, sharp-tongued but kind-hearted. It's a discreet place. You can stay there temporarily while we figure things out." I looked out the cafe window. Traffic was still moving. People were still going to work, eating, shopping, and I, in just a few days, had gone from a daughter-in-law in a comfortable house to a woman dragging a suitcase on the street. If it weren't for my child, I might have collapsed, but because of my child, I wouldn't allow myself to fall. I picked up the old phone, tucking it deep into the bottom of my bag. I turned to Dr. Stone. "Doctor, thank you for letting me hear my baby's heartbeat and for bringing me here. But from now on, I'll take care of myself. I don't want to owe anyone else, doctor." Stone looked at me, his eyes unreadable, neither sympathetic nor judgmental. "You're right, Miss Green. Owe someone once, and they can claim your whole life. But don't worry, I don't need you to pay me back." That sounded kind, but it only reminded me to be more vigilant. Sometimes, what's free in this world is the most expensive. I stood up. Jake Miller quickly took my suitcase, saying, "Walk slowly, don't get tired." I nodded, stepping out of the cafe. The wind outside carried the smell of exhaust fumes, the warmth of the sun. I suddenly felt less adrift than when I stood outside my in-laws' gate. Not because I had help, but because I had clearly seen my enemy. That evening, I followed Jake Miller to Mrs. Henderson's rental house. Mrs. Henderson looked me up and down, seeing my pregnant belly, my pale, exhausted face. She clicked her tongue. "Good heavens, a pregnant girl in this state. Come on in, dear. In this life, we help those in need. I'm not rich, but I won't abandon you out on the street." Hearing such simple, kind words, my eyes stung. I bowed my head in thanks, my heart slowly calming, as if finally finding a shelter. That night, I lay on the rental bed. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and peaceful. I opened my own phone, looking at my mother-in-law's number, my finger hovering for a long time. I couldn't call her Mom in my heart anymore, but I still had to call her as planned. I took a deep breath, sending just one message, so submissive that even I felt a bitter taste. "Yes, Mom, I'm okay. I'll go somewhere else to rest during my pregnancy and won't bother the family." After sending it, I turned off the screen, placed my hand on my belly. The baby kicked gently, as if replying. I softly whispered, just loud enough for myself to hear, "My child, I don't need anyone to love me. I just need to be clear-headed enough so no one can harm you." The night in Mrs. Henderson's rental was so quiet I could clearly hear the fan whirring, the faint dripping of water in the hallway. Quiet, yet my heart was not at peace. I lay on my side, hand on my belly, eyes wide open. Every time I closed them, I saw my mother-in-law's face when she said, "Get out." I saw the $28,000 envelope falling to the ground and the dull black iron gate closing. Mrs. Henderson knocked on my door around 10 p.m., bringing a hot bowl of chicken broth. "Eat something, dear. Being pregnant and hungry is dangerous. In this life, a full stomach keeps the spirit strong, and a mother needs even more strength." I took the broth, softly said, "Yes, ma'am," and forced a smile. The warmth of the broth made me breathe easier, but after a few spoonfuls, my heart pounded again, as if reminding me that my task wasn't done. I took out Ethan's old phone, turned it on, and went back into the home folder. Jake Miller had helped me back up some of it, but I still wanted to listen directly, because there are things you can only truly understand by hearing them with your own ears. Only then do you know what abyss you're standing before. I clicked on the second-to-last file, named only with a number. The first sound was a very faint click of a lighter, then a man's voice, hoarse and cold. "Don't worry, Eleanor. On that mountain pass, all it takes is a truck accidentally swerving into the lane, losing control, and it's done. The police will conclude it was an accident." My body stiffened. The spoonful of broth in my hand froze in midair. After a pause, my mother-in-law's voice echoed, not loud, not harsh, but so chilling it gave me goosebumps. "Good. Make it neat. Don't leave any traces." The man's voice chuckled. "Small matter. Just transfer the money on time. You do your part, Eleanor, and when it's over, act like this conversation never happened." I dropped the spoon. It clanged on the floor. I didn't dare breathe loudly. I stared at the wall opposite, as if afraid it would hear the scream of my heart. That wasn't a threat, not a casual suggestion of if you don't pay the debt, they'll crash his car. This was the voice of someone who had made a decision, and made it very calmly. I took off the headphones, hugging my belly, trying to suppress the urge to vomit. My mouth tasted bitter. An old saying flashed through my mind: evil begets evil. But how could evil sit and drink tea, discussing murder as casually as buying a bunch of vegetables at the market? I immediately called Jake Miller. My voice trembled so much I had to bite my lip to keep it from breaking. "Jake," I heard it. It wasn't a setup. Someone arranged for a truck. My mother-in-law said, "Make it neat." On the other end, dead silence. Then Jake exhaled heavily. Mia, stay calm. Don't speak loudly. You're at the rental, right?" "Yes." "Lock the door. Don't go out alone. I'll be right over, but I'll take a detour." I hung up, stood up, and locked the deadbolt. I pulled the curtains and peered through a crack in the window. The alley still had people walking by normally, but in my eyes, every shadow became suspicious. A moment later, Jake Miller arrived. He knocked lightly 3 times, then said the pre-arranged password. "Mrs. Henderson asked me to bring some prenatal milk." I opened the door. Jake Miller stepped in, looking at my face, which was ashen. He frowned. "You heard it, didn't you? Did you save it?" I handed him the phone, pointing to the audio file. Jake Miller listened, his face darkening. He cursed, then bit his tongue, looking at me apologetically. "I'm sorry, Mia." I slipped. I shook my head, my voice hoarse. "Don't apologize, Jake. Just tell me what to do now." Jake Miller sat down, rubbing his temples for a moment like someone who hadn't slept in days. Then he spoke slowly but firmly. "First, this is extremely heavy evidence, but we can't use it to threaten Eleanor ourselves. Second, we need to give it to the police in the right way so they can protect you." I swallowed hard. I'm scared if the police don't act quickly enough, and they find out I have the recording, they'll silence me. Jake Miller nodded. "I'm scared too. That's why we don't go alone, and we don't announce it beforehand. We find someone with authority and handle it discreetly." I looked at him. "Do you know anyone?" Jake Miller hesitated for a moment, then said, "There's Detective Mark Rodriguez. He's handled cases involving construction accidents before. I met him once when dealing with a materials theft case. He's solid." The word detective made my heart both tremble and light up. Even though I hadn't met him, I saw another path beyond enduring. "But who am I to meet a detective?" I asked, feeling small. Jake Miller looked straight at me. "You're the victim's wife. You have the evidence. You're doing this for your child. That's enough." I fell silent. I remembered what Mrs. Henderson said when she brought the broth: "A full stomach keeps the spirit strong." And my greatest strength now was my motherhood, and my provision was my clarity of mind. Jake Miller continued. "Do you remember the feeling of being watched? They might have been keeping an eye on you for a long time. Now, everything we do must be carefully hidden. Don't use your old number anymore. It's best to turn off your current phone and leave it in the room. When you need to communicate, use another number." I looked at my own phone, suddenly seeing it as a beacon that could reveal my location to others. I softly asked, "And my mother-in-law? How dare she do something like that?" Jake Miller gave a sad smile. Greed blinds people. Plus, there's someone behind her. The person in the recording isn't just a regular creditor. That voice sounds like someone who does services. A chill ran down my spine. Everything was increasingly beyond the scope of a family dispute. This smelled of blood. I sat down on the edge of the bed, rubbing my belly. My baby was still calm, but I knew that if I made a mistake, that calm could shatter. I spoke slowly, as if forcing myself to become a different person. Jake, I'll cooperate, but promise me that this will protect my child. Jake Miller nodded firmly. I promise. He took a pen and paper and wrote down several specific tasks. Back up the audio file to a USB drive, screenshot important messages, clearly note the time you listen to the files, and list the names of anyone who might be involved. He instructed me to memorize the address of the rental and the room number, so I could report it quickly if anything happened. While Jake Miller was writing, Mrs. Henderson stood outside the door, vaguely overhearing, surely suspecting something was amiss. She didn't ask many questions, just poked her head in. Have you two eaten anything? Don't skip meals. Pregnant women who skip meals suffer. I looked at her, my throat tight. A stranger in this world spoke words of care like precious gifts. I nodded. Yes, ma'am, I've eaten. Mrs. Henderson looked at me very deeply, then softly said, as if admonishing, In this life, those who walk in the dark often meet ghosts, but if you do no wrong, you have nothing to fear. Just keep your baby safe, and the rest will work itself out. Her words, the rest will work itself out, weren't an evasion, but the wisdom of someone experienced in handling things carefully without getting hurt. That night, after Jake Miller left, I didn't fall asleep immediately. I sat leaning against the wall, listening to the recording one more time to make sure I hadn't misheard. Each word, make it neat, was like a needle pricking my brain. I suddenly understood. My mother-in-law's words about shame, about this house having only one owner, weren't just cruel. They were the declaration of someone ready to clear away any objections, even human lives. I turned off the phone, hugged my belly, and took a deep breath. I no longer expected anyone to pity me. I only had my child and a path I had to walk correctly. I wiped my face, sat up straight, and told myself very softly but very clearly, Maria Green, you can be scared, but you cannot panic. Don't let evil drag you down with it. The next morning, Mrs. Henderson knocked on my door early. She brought a bag of sticky rice with mung beans and a hot soy milk latte, her voice gruff but caring. Eat, dear. Skipping meals while pregnant is bad for the baby. Don't overthink and forget to eat. I took the sticky rice, thanking her. The hot, fragrant mung bean sticky rice made me less nauseous than in previous days. I ate slowly, watching Ethan's old phone lying in its cloth pouch, my heart heavy as stone. Jake Miller had arranged to meet me at the end of the alley at 7 a.m. Before I left, he carefully instructed me not to bring much, only personal identification, a few loose clothes, basic prenatal medication, and the most important item, the backed-up audio recording. He even made me wear simple clothes, a cloth hat, and a face mask. Go as if you're visiting a church for peace, don't dress like you're on the run. People will notice. Hearing that, I gave a bitter, ironic laugh. I didn't want to run. I just wanted to live. But it was true that now, just to live, I had to put on an act. I messaged my mother-in-law one soft sentence, just like before. Yes, Mom, I'm going to a service to pray for Ethan and the baby. I'll be gone for a few days. I didn't wait for her reply. I turned off my phone. Every time I saw her name appear, I remembered the phrase, make it neat, and my heart felt squeezed. I pulled my small suitcase out of the rental room. Mrs. Henderson stood leaning against the door, watching me, sighing. Be careful on your travels, dear. If anything happens, call me. I may not be rich or powerful, but I won't abandon you. I nodded, my eyes stinging. I could only say, Yes, ma'am. I'm grateful to you. After that, I bowed very low, as if bowing before the kindness of a stranger. At the end of the alley, Jake Miller was waiting. He wore a baseball cap and a light jacket. He looked around like someone in a profession accustomed to vigilance. Seeing me, he just nodded slightly. "Let's go." We took a rideshare to the bus station. Jake Miller made sure I didn't sit by the window. He sat in the aisle seat, shielding me from the wind, and constantly asked if I felt dizzy. I sat still, hand on my belly, mentally reciting the doctor's words from the hospital. Breathe evenly, eat small, frequent meals, maintain a calm spirit. The bus station was crowded early in the morning, people carrying bags, calling out to each other. I leaned close to Jake Miller, not daring to look anyone in the face for long. It was a strange feeling. It felt like I was doing something wrong, when all I was doing was protecting my child. Jake Miller bought tickets for a bus heading towards the mountain region where Ethan's company used to work. He whispered, "Do you remember Ethan talking about a church retreat in the mountains? He once said when he felt stuck, he liked to go there for peace. If he were still alive and hiding, he'd look for a place like that." I nodded. I vaguely remembered. Ethan had mentioned a secluded church, accessible by winding roads. Few people knew about it. At the time, I just listened casually. Now, those old words became a lifeline to cling to. The bus departed around 9 a.m. I sat by the window, watching the city recede, tall buildings giving way to rows of tin-roofed houses, then fields, then long, desolate stretches of road. Jake Miller handed me a carton of milk and some crackers, instructing, "Just sip and nibble slowly, don't let yourself get too hungry." I obeyed. Pregnancy and long bus rides easily cause fatigue. I only dared to eat and drink a little, afraid of vomiting. Every time the bus jolted, I hugged my belly and closed my eyes, picturing Ethan pressing his ear to my belly when I first told him I was pregnant. Then, my mother-in-law's words, "Make it neat." Two images pulled at me, wrestling. One was life, the other was evil. The bus stopped at a rest stop by the road. Jake Miller led me off to walk a few laps to stretch my legs. I washed my face, looking at myself in the restroom mirror. Pale face, dark circles under my eyes, pale lips. I told myself, "Mia, don't be weak. Weakness means defeat." When I stepped out, I saw a man standing near the drink counter, wearing a black baseball cap, holding his phone. He wasn't looking directly at me, but his stance reminded me exactly of the man who had followed me when I left my in-laws' house to go to my prenatal checkup. My heart lurched. I tugged Jake Miller's arm and whispered, "Jake, I think that man looks like the one who followed me before." Jake Miller didn't turn around immediately. He just glanced quickly, then pulled me past, saying calmly, "Don't stare. Act like you don't know him." "Let's get on the bus first." I obeyed, quickly boarding the bus. Then I looked through the window. The man was still at the rest stop, but the motorcycle beside him had an unfamiliar license plate. I wasn't sure if he was following us, but the feeling of being stalked returned, sharp as a thorn. The bus continued, the road starting to climb. The constant curves made me dizzy. Jake Miller asked the driver to let me sit in a less bumpy spot. I leaned my head against the seat, listening to the rumbling of the engine, inadvertently thinking of the mountain pass and a truck losing control. Just thinking about it sent a chill down my spine. Late in the afternoon, we got off in a small town nestled by the mountains. Jake Miller rented a clean, modest, but discreet room. He didn't rent a room on the same floor as the reception. He chose a secluded room with a window overlooking the side of the building, to have an escape route if needed. Hearing him say that, I understood even more. My life now had to be planned like someone being hunted. As soon as I put down my suitcase, my phone vibrated. An unknown number appeared. But when I looked at the stored name in my phone, Dr. Stone, my hand stiffened. I hadn't saved his number, but he had called me once at the clinic. I hesitated but answered anyway, not knowing if avoiding it would put me in more danger. "Hello, Miss Green? Is that you?" Dr. Stone's voice was still warm and deep, as if nothing suspicious had happened. "Yes, doctor. I'm just calling to check on you. How have you been? Is the baby okay? Don't travel around too much. This is a sensitive time." I swallowed hard. I glanced at Jake Miller, who motioned for me to keep it brief. "Yes, I'm fine. I'm staying put." Doctor, Stone continued, speaking so gently that anyone else would think he was being caring. Remember my words, don't trust strangers. If anything comes up, call me. I'm a doctor. I won't harm you. The phrase "I won't harm you" suddenly sent a chill through me. Truly kind people usually don't need to assert their kindness. I tried to keep my voice normal. Yes, thank you, doctor. Dr. Stone gave a few more instructions about eating and resting, then hung up. I looked at the dark screen, my throat tight. Jake Miller immediately asked, "What did he say?" I gave a brief account. Jake Miller frowned. "From now on, limit answering calls from that number. We don't know whose side he's on." I nodded, but his deep, warm voice still haunted me, because it didn't sound like a passing stranger. It sounded like someone very close to this story, closer than necessary. That evening, we went to a simple diner to eat and regain our strength. I managed to eat some baked salmon and vegetable soup, which helped with the nausea. Outside the diner, a few men were talking about construction projects, material prices, and trucks needing to time their ascent on the mountain roads. Hearing them, I clutched my chopsticks tightly. Their ordinary words became words of impending death in my ears. Back in the room, Jake Miller checked the doors and locks, then handed me a small bottle of mint oil and a vitamin pill. "Go to sleep early. Tomorrow, we'll ask the locals for directions to the church retreat." I lay down and pulled the blanket up, but my eyes wouldn't close. I heard cars outside, the distant barking of dogs, then the mountain wind whistling through the window crack. In that quiet, I instinctively remembered the proverb, "A day's journey teaches more than a lifetime at home." I hadn't traveled far, yet I had learned so much. Learned to survive, learned to protect my child, learned not to trust wrongly. I placed my hand on my belly and softly said, "Sleep well with Mommy. Little one, we still have to go tomorrow." Outside the window, the streetlights were a pale yellow. A shadow passed by, stopped briefly, then continued. Perhaps it was just a passerby, but ever since I was kicked out of my in-laws' house, I no longer dared to believe anything was just a coincidence. Early the next morning, the town was still hazy with fog. I sat up and saw Jake Miller standing near the window, looking out as if on guard. Hearing me stir, he turned and offered me a bottle of warm water. "Drink a little. Don't get sick on the way to the retreat. Don't go hungry." I nodded, taking small sips. In the guest house mirror, my face was still pale, but my eyes held something harder than yesterday, the kind of hardness of someone no longer allowed to fall. We hired a local taxi to take us to the foot of the mountain. Jake Miller instructed the driver to take a winding route, avoiding the main, crowded roads. The driver looked at me, saw my pregnant belly, and said something very practical. "Going to the church for peace, ma'am? Be careful walking up the mountain. These roads are no joke." The words "mountain roads" made me pause. I placed my hand on my belly, took a deep breath, telling myself I was going to find life, not fear. At the foot of the mountain, the path began to narrow. On one side, a rock face, on the other, a deep ravine. The mountain wind blew briskly, carrying the smell of damp leaves and cold earth. As I walked, I heard my heart pound. Not from fatigue, but from anticipation. Jake Miller walked close beside me, occasionally offering his hand to support my elbow when the path was slippery. "Don't try to go fast, Mia. Pregnancy requires slow and steady." I nodded. At times, I felt like I was walking through a fog, clinging only to the phrase "slow and steady" to keep from slipping. The church appeared after a bend in the road, not large but ancient. Moss-covered roof tiles, curved eaves, and a wide Bodhi tree in front. The gentle chiming of the church bell sounded like a rhythm of peace tapping within my heart. I stepped through the gate, and my legs suddenly felt lighter, as if here, one naturally lowered their voice. In the courtyard, a few parishioners were lighting candles. Jake Miller led me directly to the guest house. A young acolyte opened the door, looked at me, then bowed. "Praise be to God. Who are you looking for?" I clasped my hands. "Yes, Father. I've come to pray for my husband and wanted to inquire about an acquaintance who used to visit here." The acolyte led us to meet the pastor. The pastor, over 70, had a thin face but bright eyes. He sat upright, his voice deep. "Speak truly, my children. This church is a place where people lay their burdens." Hearing that, my throat tightened. I tried to stay calm, briefly explaining that my husband had spoken of this church. Now I had come to light candles, pray for him, and wished to inquire about Ethan Davis, who might have sought refuge here. The pastor looked at me for a long time, then replied very concisely, "There is no one by that name at this church." I was stunned. Jake Miller stood beside me, respectfully saying, "Father, he has a scar on his hand, tall build, if you recall." The pastor shook his head, his voice still the same. "People come and go from this church. I don't keep track. If it's convenient to say." The phrase, "if it's convenient to say," sent a slight chill through me. Spiritual leaders generally don't lie, but they can also withhold the truth. I looked around the guest house. I saw a door on the west side slightly ajar, curtains swaying gently in the breeze. My heart involuntarily beat faster. I bowed my head. "Yes, Father, I am just a pregnant wife. I don't dare to trouble you. I just want to know if that person is still alive." The pastor looked down at my belly, his eyes softening slightly. He sighed softly. "Keep your heart steadfast, my child. Some things are not yet time to be revealed, so do not force them open." Hearing that, I felt both pain and frustration. I hadn't come here for words of wisdom. I had come to find my husband, to find the truth. But I still tried to maintain my composure, because sacred ground didn't allow me to lose my temper. We asked the pastor for permission to light candles. He nodded, signaling the acolyte to bring them. I knelt before the main altar, hands clasped, my heart tangled like thread. Amidst the scent of incense, I whispered, "Ethan, if you're here, please give me a sign." I stood up, intending to go out into the courtyard, when the acolyte passed by, inadvertently whispering to another acolyte, but I heard it clearly. The guest in the west room said, "If anyone asks, say no one is here." I jumped. Jake Miller also spun around. The acolyte, having just realized his slip, turned pale and stammered, "Oh, I misspoke." I stepped forward, my voice hoarse, a tall guest with a scar on his hand, right? The acolyte looked at the pastor, then at me, his eyes wide with alarm. The pastor gently tapped the wooden fish drum beside him. The clack echoed like a reminder. The acolyte immediately bowed his head and fell silent. Jake Miller pulled me back, speaking very softly. "Don't press him, Mia. Perhaps the pastor is keeping him safe." I nodded, but my eyes didn't leave the west door. Hope flared up, burning hot like embers. I remembered the lullaby my mom used to sing, "The Lord provides." I had been pushed to the brink. Surely God wouldn't leave me without a way out. I asked the pastor for permission to go to the back of the church to get some air. He nodded, only cautioning, "Walk slowly. Don't go alone." Jake Miller accompanied me. We walked around the stone corridor, and the closer we got to the west side, the colder the wind felt. I heard my own footsteps and my heartbeat, like two things racing each other. Just as we approached the wooden door on the west side, a familiar deep voice sounded behind us, as gentle as the wind, but it made me freeze. "Miss Green, you've gone too far." I turned around. "Dr." Robert Stone stood at the end of the corridor, wearing a gray jacket, holding a string of prayer beads like a worshiper. His smile was still kind, but his eyes were no longer. They were cold, clear, and showed no surprise at seeing me there. I instinctively took a step back. "Doctor, why are you here?" He chuckled softly. "I told you, don't wander around. The mountains are high, the roads are empty. If something happens, who will save you?" Jake Miller immediately stepped in front of me, his voice sharp. "You followed us." Stone tilted his head as if hearing something absurd. "Follow? No, I just arrived at the right time." A chill ran down my spine. I looked at the prayer beads in his hand, suddenly seeing them as a prop. He took another step, his voice still deep, but every word was firm. "Jake Miller, do you think bringing her up here was smart? This church is a place where people hide, but it's also a place where people are found." Jake Miller clenched his fist. I heard his knuckles crack. I tugged his sleeve and whispered, "Jake, don't." Stone burst out laughing, a laugh that no longer concealed anything. "Miss Green, be a good girl. I understand you want to protect your baby, but you're protecting it in the wrong place." I trembled but tried to keep my voice steady. "Who are you?" Stone didn't answer immediately. He looked towards the main altar, then at the pastor from a distance. The pastor still stood, his eyes stern. Stone gave a slight smirk. "I'm the one who helps make things neat, as people want." In that moment, from both ends of the corridor, several men emerged, rough-looking, shifty-eyed, not like pilgrims. One blocked the path down, another stood right behind us. I heard Jake Miller breathe heavily, whispering, "Mia," back against the wall. "Don't let them grab you." I hugged my belly, my back pressed against the cold rock wall. In my head, only one proverb echoed: "When with the devout, wear pious robes. When with demons, prepare for battle." I had thought I found refuge at the church, but it turned out someone in polite clothes was waiting. Stone pulled a small object from his pocket. I didn't need to look closely to know it was a syringe because of the glint of metal. He spoke slowly, as if teaching a lesson. "Miss Green, don't make this difficult for me. I don't like noise. Just take a nap, and everything will be peaceful." I gasped. Jake Miller lunged forward, shouting, "You wouldn't dare!" Immediately, two of the henchmen rushed to restrain Jake Miller. The sound of footsteps, clothes brushing against the wall, and guttural shouts echoed in the church corridor, chilling me. I wanted to scream, but my throat was blocked. I could only hug my belly, biting my lip until it bled, trying not to fall. The pastor quickly approached from a distance, his voice loud and commanding. "This is a sacred place. What are you doing?" Stone turned, still smiling, but his eyes were like daggers. "Father, just focus on your prayers. Don't interfere in worldly affairs." The pastor stood firm, running his fingers over his rosary, his voice deep as a bell. "Here, worldly affairs and spiritual affairs are not separate. Anyone who commits evil under this roof insults God." I looked at the pastor, feeling both grateful and desperate. The church's doors might offer temporary shelter, but I was surrounded. I heard Jake Miller gasp, held tightly. I heard Stone approaching, his faint cologne mixing with the smell of incense to create a suffocating aroma. I closed my eyes for a second, clutching the old phone in my pocket as if holding evidence, and also as if holding on to my last lifeline. I would not allow myself to fall here. Not because I was brave, but because my child had not yet been born. I dared not look directly at the syringe again. Just the glint of metal was enough to turn my insides cold. I pressed my back against the rock wall, my hands clutching my belly, trying to keep my breathing even. Each breath at that moment felt like pulling a thread. Pull too hard, and it would break. Stone took another step, his voice still gentle, as if coaxing a child. "Miss Green, be good. I don't want you to feel pain." Hearing that made me recoil. Those who say they don't want to inflict pain are often the ones about to inflict the most. Jake Miller was held tightly by two men, his face flushed, veins bulging on his neck. He tried to struggle, but they were stronger and had the advantage. He could only yell, his voice hoarse, "Mia, run! Run! How?" When a syringe was in front of me, a wall behind me, and the path down was blocked by another man. I looked at the pastor. He stood firm in the middle of the corridor, his eyes stern, his voice sharp like a bell. "Let them go immediately. There are witnesses here, and God is witness. You are creating grave karma." Stone sneered. "You're talking about karma with me, Father? I thrive on people's fear." He then leaned back, signaling. One of the henchmen stepped forward, his rough hand grabbing my wrist. I pulled back hard, my lower abdomen aching. Fear flared up, but at the same time, something else ignited even stronger, my maternal instinct. Without thinking, I bent down and bit the back of the hand holding me as hard as I could. A yell burst out. The man, in pain, released his grip. I immediately used all my remaining strength to turn and sprint towards the main altar. I couldn't run fast, but I ran like someone chased by fire, still holding my belly, trying not to slip. Stone yelled softly, not loudly, as if afraid of being heard. "Catch her!" Footsteps pounded on the stone floor. I gasped for breath, my throat burning. In front of me, the church courtyard opened up. A few parishioners lighting candles turned around, startled. As I reached the steps of the main altar, the pastor strode forward, extending his arms like a barrier. "Stop!" he bellowed, his voice resounding. "If you want to lay a hand on a pregnant woman here, you'll have to go through me first." The henchman froze for a moment. In that instant, I pulled the old phone from my pocket, my hands trembling, but my mind strangely clear. I remembered Jake Miller's warning. If you have evidence, keep it safe, and activate it when needed. I tapped the home folder, selecting the audio file with Stone's voice. I didn't use the headphones anymore. I turned on the speaker for the entire church courtyard to hear. A faint static sound, then the man's hoarse voice. On that mountain pass, a truck accidentally swerving into the lane, losing control, and it's done. The nearby parishioners froze, some covered their mouths. I looked directly at Stone, whose face briefly changed. Just a fleeting change, but enough for me to know I had touched his greatest fear, being exposed. Stone stepped forward, intending to snatch the phone, but the pastor immediately struck the wooden fish drum hard against the stone steps. The loud clack echoed chillingly. "Do not act recklessly." But those men weren't afraid of God. One reckless man lunged forward. The pastor didn't fight back, but he spread his arms, a frail old man standing firm. The man paused because several parishioners had gathered around. Some held up their phones, recording. Others yelled, "Good heavens, what are you doing?" Stone narrowed his eyes, lowering his voice to give an order. "Turn that thing off." I took a step back, holding the phone close to my chest, the speaker still playing. My hands trembled, but I held on as if holding on to my child's life. I said, my voice hoarse, "You wanted it neat, didn't you?" "I'll make it neat right here, in front of everyone." Stone hissed a curse, then unexpectedly pulled out the syringe, aiming directly at me. My heart felt like it stopped. In that exact moment, from the church gate, a siren blared, tearing through the quiet space. "Honk, honk, honk," the siren wailed. I turned my head to see 2 pickup trucks and a 7-seater vehicle stopping abruptly outside the gate. Uniformed officers poured in, their voices clear and firm. "Police, everyone freeze." The henchmen panicked, like a disturbed beehive. One fled towards the back, another tried to climb over the wall. Stone froze for a moment, then immediately retreated, his face drained of all color. He still tried to maintain a calm facade, but his eyes were wide with panic. An officer stepped directly towards him, his eyes sharp, signaling to restrain him. 2 officers rushed to apprehend the nearest henchman. As for Stone, he spun around, looking for an escape route, but the pastor was standing firm, blocking the corridor. He just looked at Stone, not saying much, only sighing softly. The path of evil is often short-lived. Stone gritted his teeth, attempting to slip past, but an officer swiftly grabbed his arm, pulling it behind his back. The syringe fell to the stone floor, rolling, its metallic glint extinguished. I stood like a statue, my legs completely weak. I could only hug my belly and collapse onto the steps. The pastor turned back, supporting my shoulder, his voice deeply calm. "Breathe slowly, my child. Don't panic and harm the baby." I tried to breathe, but tears kept falling. This time, not from humiliation, but from escaping an abyss. Jake Miller was released, his sleeve torn, a bruise on his face. He ran to me, kneeling beside me. "Mia, are you okay? Is the baby okay?" I nodded frantically, unable to speak. I just gripped his hand, clutching it tightly, as if afraid that if I let go, I would be pulled back into the nightmare. A man in plain clothes approached, his posture neat, his eyes sharp, his voice clear. "I'm Detective Mark Rodriguez. Who is Miss Maria Green?" I looked up. Jake Miller looked at me and quickly said, "He's the one I told you about, Mia. Stay calm." I tried to sit up straight, my voice trembling. Yes, I am. Detective Rodriguez looked at me, then at the phone in my hand. He spoke concisely, but every word was firm. You just activated a recording. We heard it. Please hand over the device to me and tell me where you got this file. I held out the phone, my hand still shaking. I had no more secrets to hide, and I didn't want to hide anymore. I just stated the main point. This is my husband's phone, Ethan Davis. The phone contains recordings related to the Mountain Pass accident, and the woman's voice in the recording is my mother-in-law, Eleanor Davis. Detective Rodriguez showed no surprise, like someone hearing a shocking story. He just nodded slightly, as if he already had pieces of the puzzle. He signaled to his subordinates, secure the scene, collect evidence, ask the pastor and the parishioners for their statements. Then he turned to me, his voice lowered, adopting the tone of a professional who was both firm and protective. You and your unborn child will be taken for a health check immediately. From now on, you are not to move on your own. We will arrange protection for you. Hearing the word protection, my entire body relaxed, as if finally someone had said the right thing. But then another fear flooded me. I grabbed Detective Rodriguez's hand, speaking quickly, afraid of being too late. Officer, I'm afraid my mother-in-law will find out. She'll do something reckless. Detective Rodriguez looked straight into my eyes. Rest assured, Miss Green. Once you've filed a report and submitted evidence, any intimidating actions against you will be considered aggravating circumstances. The important thing is your cooperation and safety. I nodded, tears falling onto his hand. In that moment, I suddenly understood that people could use affection to stab you, but they could also use the law to stand up. An ambulance from the area was called. Before getting in the ambulance, I turned back to look at the church courtyard one last time. The scent of incense was still fragrant. The church bell had just chimed. The pastor stood on the steps, hands clasped, softly saying, "You've overcome this, my child. Remember to keep your heart bright. Don't let hatred blind you." I bowed my head and softly replied, "Yes, Father, I know." Jake Miller followed my ambulance to the medical station. He sat silently beside me, only occasionally urging me to drink water and breathe evenly. I looked out the window as the mountains receded. In my mind, only one sentence was crystal clear. They had wanted everything neat, but this time, the ones being cleaned up would not be my child and me. I was taken to a medical station near the town as dusk settled. The doctor took my blood pressure and listened to the baby's heartbeat, saying thankfully the baby hadn't been affected. I lay on my side on the bed, still hugging my belly as if afraid that letting go would make everything collapse again. Jake Miller sat outside the door, a bruised mark on his face, his eyes red with anger. A young female nurse offered me a glass of sugar water, softly saying, "Please drink this, ma'am. Pregnant women can get dizzy if their blood sugar drops." I took the glass and drank in sips, my throat still bitter. Bitter from fear, but also because I understood that if it hadn't been for that siren today, my child and I could have vanished right in front of the church doors. About half an hour later, Detective Mark Rodriguez entered. He was accompanied by a female officer taking notes. Detective Rodriguez didn't offer many social platitudes of comfort, but asked directly, his voice clear, "Miss Maria Green, are you well enough to work?" I nodded. "Yes, I'm fine. I can do it." Detective Rodriguez pulled up a chair and sat nearby, maintaining a respectful distance. He said, "Please tell your story in chronological order. Dates, times, who said what, who did what. Just tell the truth. No need to make it sound good." I took a deep breath. Then I told my story. From the day Ethan went to the construction site in early July 2025, the dawn call reporting the accident, the funeral at home, my mother-in-law taking the keys, Uncle Frank mentioning the paperwork, up to the day I was thrown out with the $28,000 envelope and the clinic address. I recounted being followed when I went for my prenatal checkup, the strange text message, meeting Jake Miller, and then the old phone with the home folder. When I spoke of my mother-in-law's voice in the recording saying, "Make it neat," my throat seized up. I had to pause for a few seconds before I could continue. The female officer offered me tissues. Detective Rodriguez only nodded slightly, not pressing, but his eyes were sharper. You confirm the female voice in the audio file is your mother-in-law, Eleanor Davis? I answered with certainty, as this was something I could not be wrong about. Yes, it is. I live with her. I hear her voice every day. I cannot be mistaken. And about the man named Robert Stone, you met him at the clinic, right? I looked straight at him. Yes. He claimed to be a doctor. But today I understand. He didn't come to save me. He came to lead me into a trap. Detective Rodriguez quickly wrote a few lines, then asked, "Do you have any other evidence besides your husband's phone?" I said, "There's a backup file Jake has, and there's the strange text message that warned me." I didn't elaborate further. I was afraid of saying too much and sounding dishonest. Detective Rodriguez nodded, his voice still even. "We will extract the data, cross-reference voice recordings, trace phone numbers, and travel itineraries. Your job now is to stay safe and cooperate." Hearing the word safe, I suddenly realized my shoulders were trembling. They say, you need ingredients to make a cake. At this moment, I only wished for a solid foundation to stand on, not to sink further. After signing the statement, I was arranged to stay in a quiet room in a motel used by the support force. There was someone on guard outside the door. Jake Miller stood in the hallway, handing me a bag of food, a carton of chicken soup, and a banana. He said softly, his voice hoarse, "Eat, Mia. As long as you're alive, you win. Trust me." I looked at him, suddenly wanting to smile but unable to. I only replied, "You should also go get your bruises checked out. Don't push yourself too hard." He nodded, turning away quickly as if afraid I would see his eyes moisten. That night, I managed a short sleep, but near dawn, I was woken by a soft knock on the door. The female officer from last night stood outside, saying, "Miss Green, Detective Rodriguez needs you." I put on my coat and stepped out. Detective Rodriguez stood in the hallway, holding his phone, his expression serious, but his eyes held a different kind of intensity, not cold, but cautious. "Could you come with us to the state hospital?" My heart pounded. "What's wrong?" Detective Rodriguez spoke each word clearly. "The hospital has a male patient who was brought in after an accident, falling into a ravine over 2 weeks ago. He has temporary amnesia and a scar on his left wrist. Doctors say his build and age match your husband's description." I froze. All sounds seemed to cut off. Only the pounding of my heart remained. I clutched the edge of my coat, asking, my voice not sounding like my own, "Are you sure?" Detective Rodriguez shook his head. "Not sure. That's why we need you to identify him. But you must prepare yourself mentally. It could be him, or it could not." I nodded repeatedly. I didn't dare to be joyful, because if I rejoiced and it turned out to be false, the pain would be deeper. But my legs trembled as if wanting to run. The car took us to the hospital while it was still foggy. The familiar smell of antiseptic reminded me of the morning I fainted at home, but this time I didn't fall. I walked slowly, placing my hand on my belly, silently telling myself, "My child, Mommy is standing firm." The on-call doctor led us to a hospital room at the end of the corridor. 2 plainclothes police officers stood outside the door. Detective Rodriguez knocked and entered first. I followed, my heart feeling like it wanted to burst from my chest. On the bed was a man, noticeably thinner, his hair cut short, one arm bandaged. He was facing the window. Hearing the sound, he turned around. I saw that face, that nose, that jawline. I had touched it, seen it every day, but it was thinner, paler, and his eyes were strange. Strange, like the eyes of a stranger. I stood frozen, my lips trembling. "Ethan," the man looked at me, frowning, as if trying to retrieve a memory. Then he asked, his voice hoarse, "Who are you?" It felt like someone had slapped my heart. Tears immediately welled up. I took another step, but he unconsciously recoiled, his eyes wary, like someone who didn't remember where he was. Detective Rodriguez stood beside him, calmly saying, "Sir, please calm down. This is family here to visit." I tried to swallow my sobs. tried not to rush to hug him because I was afraid of startling him. I just held out my hand so he could see my wedding ring, my voice trembling but clear. "I'm Mia, your wife. I'm carrying your child." He looked down at my belly, then up at my face. His eyes wavered slightly, very subtly. He raised his left hand as if unconsciously touching the scar on his wrist, then shook his head. "I don't remember. I only remember the sound of brakes and a blinding light." My throat tightened. I wanted to ask, "Who did this to you?" But I knew it wasn't the time. I just nodded, tears falling onto the back of my hand. "It's okay. As long as you're alive. If you don't remember, you'll remember gradually." He looked at me longer, the wariness in his eyes lessening slightly, replaced by confusion. He softly said, very quietly, as if afraid of hurting anyone, "I'm sorry. I made you cry." I laughed through my tears. This man, even with amnesia, still had that gentle way about him, just like Ethan. I shook my head. "Don't apologize. You rest. I'll be here." Detective Rodriguez looked at me and nodded subtly. Then he turned to the doctor, briefly discussing the patient's condition, witness protection procedures, and limiting contact with strangers. I sat on the chair beside the bed, maintaining a sufficient distance so he wouldn't be afraid. I told him small stories. Stories about the preschool, how he used to love baked salmon, how he often told me, "Don't worry, honey." I didn't talk about my mother-in-law, didn't talk about the recordings. I just wanted to keep him tethered to life with warm memories. He didn't remember, but he listened. Occasionally, he closed his eyes as if trying to imagine. When I stood up, intending to go out and get some water, he suddenly asked softly, "Mia, is that really your name?" I turned back, my heart tightening but still warm. "Yes, my husband gave me Maria Green. He used to say it sounded wholesome, easy to live with." He looked at me one more time, his eyes no longer completely distant. It was like a door opening a tiny crack. I returned to my chair, placed my hand on my belly, and breathed slowly. Outside, the hospital corridor was still noisy, but in this room, for the first time since being kicked out of my in-laws' house, I had one certainty to cling to. Ethan was alive. Even if his memory hadn't returned, I still had my husband, my child's father, and another chance to stand up with the truth. I sat by Ethan's hospital bed for a while longer, then the doctor reminded me to rest. Detective Mark Rodriguez arranged for me to stay in the family housing area, with protection. He spoke directly, without beating around the bush. "Miss Green, from now on, you and your unborn child are important witnesses. Do not contact your in-laws on your own. We will handle that." I nodded. I knew I was no longer allowed to act on emotion. Emotion had once led me to be thrown out on the street. This time, I had to proceed with reason. In the days that followed, everything unfolded like entries in a ledger, clear, cold, but also the only thing that could save lives. On the 18th of May 2025, the police officially took my statement for a second time, cross-referencing it with the data extracted from Ethan's old phone. Jake Miller submitted the backup USB drive. Mrs. Henderson was also invited to confirm the time I arrived at her rental, my health condition, and the strange message I received. She spoke plainly, her voice direct but sincere. "I don't know who's right or wrong, I just know that pregnant girl was thrown out on the street, pale as a ghost. People may have their evil schemes, but God has eyes." The words "God has eyes" made my eyes sting, but I didn't dare to trust fate. I trusted evidence and the law more. Robert Stone and his henchmen were apprehended immediately after the incident at the church. Stone initially denied it, claiming he only threatened to get the phone, but when cross-referenced with voice analysis, location tracking, and especially the syringe evidence, along with witness testimonies at the church, his true nature began to show. Detective Rodriguez only had to say one concise sentence: "Don't think wearing a lab coat cleanses your sins." As for my mother-in-law, Eleanor Davis, she was brought in for questioning after the police searched her house and confiscated several documents related to unusual money transfers. Uncle Frank was also called in shortly after. I wasn't present when they were taken away, but just imagining it sent a chill down my spine. I had once called her Mom, once endured humiliation, believing that a moment of patience can save a lifetime of trouble. It turned out that too much patience made people think you didn't feel pain. Life is indeed about good things happening to good people, but sometimes, to find good, you have to pull yourself out of evil. Ethan stayed in the hospital for over a month, his memory like a tangled tape, sometimes retrieving a segment, sometimes slipping. I didn't press him. Each day, I would tell him a little, recounting how we met in late 2023, how he used to drive to Georgia to eat a bowl of street noodles and laugh. Country food, but delicious. I recounted our wedding day in May 2025, how I wore a pink wedding dress and his hands trembled holding the bouquet. I told him stories as if lulling a child to sleep, because I knew memories sometimes needed to be called back by peace, not by force. By mid-November 2025, one night Ethan suddenly woke up, clutching his head, his face ashen. He gasped, stammering, "Mountain pass, headlights, a horn, a truck." It forced me off. I held his shoulders, trying to keep him from panicking. Detective Rodriguez, who was on duty outside, was called in. Ethan spoke in fragments, but enough to piece together the picture. Before going up the mountain pass, he received a warning text message, "Don't proceed." He was suspicious and afraid, but the construction project was urgent, and he thought he was just an engineer. Who would go to such lengths? Then a truck swerved and forced him off the road. He swerved to avoid it, and his car flipped into the ravine. He didn't die but was trapped. He crawled out, exhausted. The person who found him wasn't from the company but a passerby who called for help. Ethan said that much, then looked at me as if remembering something painful. "Mia, Mom, did Mom protect you?" My throat tightened. I wanted to say no, but I didn't want that knife to pierce him further as he struggled to remember. I just held his hand, speaking the truth but maintaining my composure. "I'm alive, the baby's alive, thanks to us realizing in time. As for the rest, the law will answer." On the 5th of May 2026, the preliminary trial took place. I walked into the courtroom with my large belly, my hands trembling but my back held straight. In the defendant's chair, Robert Stone looked at me, his eyes still holding that coldness I remembered from the church corridor. My mother-in-law sat behind him, her face devoid of makeup, her hair pulled up high, dark circles under her eyes. Uncle Frank bowed his head, completely losing his once booming demeanor. When the court clerk replayed the audio recording, truck accidentally swerving, losing control, the entire courtroom fell silent. Hearing Eleanor Davis's voice again, "Make it neat," clawed at my heart. But this time, I didn't collapse. I placed my hand on my belly, telling myself, my child must witness its mother standing with dignity. Ethan was brought in as a victim. He was still thin, but his eyes held a new spirit. When the judge asked, he answered more clearly than I expected. "I don't ask for mercy for anyone. I only ask the court to protect my wife and child, because they tried to kill all three of us." That one sentence was enough to make me burst into tears, crying from the anger of being rightfully recognized, and because my husband had finally, truly, stood by my side. The verdict was severe for Stone and his accomplices for their actions related to staging an attack and conspiring to cause an accident. My mother-in-law and Uncle Frank also paid the price for their complicity in aiding and abetting fraud. I don't need to detail the specific numbers. I only remember the feeling when the judge's gavel struck, the resounding thud, and a weight lifted from my heart, as if a stone had been removed from my chest. Leaving the courtroom, I didn't look back. I didn't curse them. I only thought one thing: evil people chose their own path. Sow the wind, reap the whirlwind indeed. In early February 2026, I went into labor. The pain came unexpectedly in the early morning. Just as life often throws curveballs, I was both scared and amused. It turned out that after all the turmoil, the thing that made me cry the most was the pain of childbirth. Ethan held my hand, his eyes red. "Mia, hang in there. I'm here." I remember now, I remember everything. I was in pain but laughed through my tears. "Good that you remember everything, but don't disappear on me again, or I'll give you hell." Ethan choked up, nodding frantically, the nod of someone filled with both regret and deep love. Our son was born healthy, his cries thin but clear, like an affirmation that his mother had kept him safe. Ethan held our son, his hands trembling as they had the day I showed him the pregnancy test. He could only say one sentence, his voice breaking, "I'm sorry, my child, for leaving your mother and you alone." I looked at the two of them, looked at Ethan's eyes, which now held me within them, and suddenly the months of being kicked out, of being driven into a trap, were no longer a stain. They were the price I paid to learn how to stand tall. We left our old life behind after that. No more spacious house, no more feeling of wealth that had once tempted people. Ethan found a new job at a smaller workshop, doing what he loved, living a simpler life. I returned to the preschool, still surrounded by children's laughter, the smell of milk and crayons, simple things, but more precious than gold. The lesson I kept for myself was, never place blind trust in anyone, even those who claim to be family, and never let patience become an excuse for others to trample on you. When needed, be clear-headed, embrace the law, and stand up for yourself. Dear listeners who have accompanied me until the end of my story, how did you find today's tale? I'm curious about the impression it has left in your hearts and the thoughts it has sparked in you. Please feel free to share your impressions and opinions in the comments. I will carefully read each of them. The likes and subscriptions you give me are the greatest source of strength and motivation for creating better stories in the future. Please don't forget to do so. I sincerely wish that your life is always filled with happiness and good fortune, and that the warm light in your hearts never fades.